right, welcome back to another edition of Bible Answers Unfiltered. I am your host, Dr. Al Garza. So, today I'm going to be responding to this discussion with Sean Finnegan and Metaphysics Mike about the debate I had with Mike a few nights ago. I need to clear the air a few things because there's a lot of things in this video that they misrepresent things that I've said or what I believe. Even though sometimes they are trying to clarify certain things that I've said, if you've watched the debate carefully and you actually hear what I say, it is not what these gentlemen are making it sound to be. Now, it's just probably a mistake on their part that they haven't really watched the debate carefully and are pretty much just going off of memory. But when you're discussing someone's position or you're trying to discuss what they're trying to say and you're misrepresenting that position, that's a problem. Few things I did mention here that was completely inaccurate on what I did in the debate or said, or what I said in the debate, or what I even believe in regards to what they said, the Aramaic, the Peshitta, and all these things, because I brought up the different languages of Scripture to support the position. So we're going to go over this, a few things. Um, I'm going to respond to pretty much comments they've made, and so you can see the difference of what I really said or what I meant versus what they took from what I said, or even sometimes misunderstood or misrepresented. I don't think it's intentional, but I think it's just the fact that they didn't really look at the debate carefully on my end to see what I was trying to say. But let's take a look at this first part, and then I'll stop and go as they make their comments.
Welcome, Mike Temperato to Restitutio. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Honored to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. For those of you who aren't familiar, Restitutio is a podcast dedicated to recovering authentic Christianity and living it out today. Mike Temperato is also Metaphysics Mike, and he's known from his YouTube channel. And on December 1st, you debated Al Garza on the question, is Jesus Yahweh? What was your, before I ask you about how did you feel about your experience? I want to ask you, how did that come about? How did that end up getting set up?
Yeah, so Al Garza has taken a lot of time to refute some of my videos, including some of the new stuff we're doing with the UCA, responding to, viral Trinitarian content. And he's also had some choice words. Sometimes I think he can be kind of rude. And he was asking me to debate for probably about like 1, maybe 2 months.
All right, so let me quickly make this point. When he says I mean, kind of rude, I asked him on on one of his posts one time what I said might have been rude because he said this to his advertisement for the debate, and I said I don't know what I said to you that was rude or personal because I've only responded to his videos in the same way that he makes his videos, where he criticizes Trinitarian scholars, he criticizes how they think and the way they how they don't think, and sometimes even many Unitarians about Mike have said that even Mike is very forward and brash about things, and I respond the same way. So if he took it as being rude, I think he needs to kind of reevaluate also how he makes his videos, because his videos about Trinitarians and people believe it are sometimes very they're not nice. Okay, they're very insensitive to them as far as how they think and the way they think, and irrational, and they don't have no sense of this. So I respond in the same way. Mike takes it rude, but again, I think I respond the way people respond to me or make comments or even about our belief system. So, and I asked Mike if I ever said anything rude to him personally, which he never responded. And I said if I apologize if I made rude comments to him personally about him, but I was always criticizing or attacking his position on his videos, never him personally. So if he takes it as rude, okay, but again, his videos are just as straightforward and unfiltered as things that I've said. So, but let's continue.
And eventually I
So
just agreed.
He's been reaching out to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let me just say, I did reach out to him one time in his comments saying, "Hey, let's debate this topic," from one of his videos, and he responded, said, "Sure." I just did it one time. He responded, "Sure, let's do that." He gave me his Gmail, or he said, "Here's my Gmail," and I sent him an email about setting it up. He never responded to that email. In fact, I have them. He never responded to him. I emailed a few times, "Hey, Mike, I know you said yeah, let's do it. You agreed. Do you have any idea?" He never responded after that, not once. Um, so the first time I asked him to debate, he agreed on the YouTube post, which is still up. He gave me his email through there, said, "Hey, just email me." I did, and no response. So every so often, I say, "Hey, Mike, I saw some of the videos." I say, "Hey, Mike, you said you agreed to a this debate or discussion. Do you still want to do it?" And he never responded. So I emailed him a few times, and then I just simply said, "All right, I guess he doesn't really want to, even though he agreed to it." So I kind of just left it alone at that point. And this is where we're going to talk about Donnie, and I'll let him explain it, and then I'll also respond.
Yeah, eventually I just said, "Okay." I said, "Yes." That what happens on like YouTube, at least my experience so far, is that they'll reach out to different debate platforms that they've seen me on, and the moderators try and middleman that. So, people just kept saying, "Do you want to do this debate? Do you want to do it?" And so I said, "Let's do it, Al. All right. Who
I
wants
love
to
that.
smoke?"
So yes, after I never got any response from Mike, eventually I saw some of Donnie's videos and debates, and I reached out to Donnie. Said, "Hey, Donnie, I'm available for debates if you'd like. If you want to put something together." I never mentioned Mike's name in the emails. I just said I just opened my up to Donnie's YouTube channel and said, "Hey, I'm open for debate if you have anybody who wants to debate on certain topics or discussions regarding the Trinity or so forth." It is Donnie who came back to me and said, "Hey, do you want to debate Mike, or I'll reach out to him and ask him and so forth." And I told Donnie, "Yeah, if he wants to." I go, "He never responded to me about debating. He agreed to it." But so Donnie set it up. It was initially Donnie who came up with Mike and a few other people that I agreed to debate as well. But I guess Mike responded. So it was Donnie who actually set it up. When I reached out to Donnie and asked him to, set up a debate if he wants, and I'm available. But I never asked for Mike directly at that point. It was Donnie who actually, for some reason, reached out to him. So I just thought Mike didn't want to debate because he never responded to my emails. So
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I'm not very knowledgeable of debaters on YouTube. I had never heard of Al Garza. I guess he's kind of well known in certain circles. I think maybe 50,000 followers. Do I have that right?
Hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of a big deal for you to get that exposure and access to his audience, which is, in my opinion, the real value of debates is getting access to an audience that would never consider what you're saying. But since their guys in the ring fighting too, they'll listen. So
Yeah, right.
what would you say your experience was like? How would it's been what, 3 days now. So looking back on it, how do you feel about it?
So it was originally supposed to be on a different date. And just like a few days later, when I was going to be back here at my home in New York, but something happened. They needed to move it to the first. And so I was actually in Colorado with my family for Thanksgiving. So, I was inside a little bit torqued just because, 4 hours on the last day there with my family, it kind of would have been nice to spend it with them. But in the grand scheme, this is what I do, and my family, they're so awesome. They made it possible for me to join. So that was like the first thing. I wasn't at home, and I was just thinking about family. But other than that, I thought.
So I'll respond to that briefly. See, I'm not sure what that means. Donnie gave him the option in the email to change the date if he couldn't do it on the first. He said, Donnie set up originally on the first. Mike said something about the fourth. But Donnie said, "Well, I already set it up on the first because Donnie wasn't available on the fourth." But he also told Mike, "If you can't do it on the first, we'll make it for a later date." So Mike always had the option to change the date. Donnie couldn't do it on the fourth or the fifth, I believe, that originally Mike wanted. I have to check the email, but um, Donnie had originally made it for the first. Mike had made a comment about that, but then agreed to it. But again, Donnie opened it up and said, "If that won't work for you, let me know and we'll make it for another date." I was open to that. I had no problem for any date. So I'm not sure what Mike is trying to say here because Mike had the option to change the date at any time, and Donnie gave him that option. So I'm not sure why he makes it sound like it's a big deal because it really wasn't, and we were open to any date even after the first if Mike couldn't do it. So he had that choice and he had that option, and he just went with it. So
Thought it was good. I like Donnie. I like the channel. All I was concerned that he would be kind of toxic, but he wasn't. I thought in
I
terms
thought
of
he
how,
was pretty great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He listen. He's not really been that cool in the comment section.
Okay,
Just,
so he,
just say,
as a commenter, he's a little more fierce, but in person, he never seemed to lose his cool, and he was kind
yeah.
of like a little, if anything, low energy.
Yeah, so I was happy about that for sure. And I mean, if I was just going to give my general thoughts in terms of my arguments about Yahweh being a name, like a real name, right? Not a personal name in a human sense. That was one of the very weird things he said. He presupposed Trinitarianism by actually defining Yahweh as one being of three persons, and even that he sort of derived from the meaning of Yahweh about being basically self-existing, right? Who was, who is to come. But like, I mean, that was like a crazy jump. He made a ton of assertions that I don't think were well supported. So I don't think
it's something that Mike does, and even Sean does this a little bit, is generalizing so broadly and over dramatically saying that's not well supported and so forth. That is not true. I gave a breakdown of the Hebrew name Yod-Heh-Vav or Yahweh, Yehovah, as well as in the Hebrew how it's assembled through there. And my PowerPoints even going to Exodus 3. This is common with many Jews, rabbinic Jews, Hebrew speaking Jews about the name. It is not, and I just argued that it's not a name of a single person, like the Unitarians believe, but it's a name that represents three persons. So the name is spoken, and so what I use is I use Brown Driver Briggs to show that the name can reflect the character of God. Even here in Jastro, which is another one on two, Mark for Shem name, title, nature. Um, so again, these are things that I looked at regards to who he is. Let me get back over here real quick. Hopefully I can do this. But regards to the name, um, oops, sorry about that. I definitely did reflect the grammar, the textbooks, Brown Jar Briggs Complete, Josh, so you can see that the name is not just a name like we use it today, anachronistically try to put it back into the scripture as just the name of a person. That's the point I was trying to make. It's a name that represents given to three persons within Scripture. And those three persons, what we call the Trinity. So it's not as Mike was saying, some weird nuance. This is something even Trinitarians believe that the name is given to three persons, represented by three persons, reflects the nature and character of who he is. And that's how names also reflect in ancient Semitic languages, especially in the ancient Near East, specifically in Hebrew. So that's what I meant by that.
he was able to demonstrate that Yahweh isn't a name, just like every other name, right? Which picks out an individual. I don't think he gave any good reason why the certain divine attributes that Jesus could have, whether that's forgiving sins, performing miracles, that these must mean that he's Yahweh, like by his nature. I don't think he disproved my point at all, right? The Bible explicitly states Jesus himself that, his authority doesn't come from himself. His actions, his all his teachings. So I don't think he did well on that. Um,
Again, this is a Unitarian perspective regarding how I did versus what he believes. Let me get this real quick here. So it's reflective of the fact that we're dealing with how Trinitarians understand the Scripture as a whole from the Hebrew Bible, how the three persons, one of them becomes the Messiah, embeds as the man, and I quote the Philippians passage on this. He existed as God, took on the form of a servant, became a man, found as a fashion of a man, and that man was subject to the Father, who is Yod He Vav He, as well as the true spirit nature of the Messiah reflects back to being Yod He Vav He, one of the persons revealed in the Hebrew Scriptures. So that's why I made it clear. It's definitional terms here. This is why we have different. And I made this clear in the debate. We have different definitions, different terminologies for how we say things. Whether he says Yod Heh Vav Heh or Yahweh, he's thinking one person. You say it to a Trinitarian. It's a name reflecting of the nature and character and persons who are revealed in the Hebrew Scriptures for us. So that's what we talk about, and that's what we understand. That's why there's a difference here in thought.
He also gave no real good explanation for the contradictions in the hypostatic union, right? So if Jesus is truly God, if he's Yahweh, then he can't sin, for example. Sin's not even possible. But we know that according to the scriptures that Jesus was genuinely tempted and he had a free will choice to whether he was going to obey God or not. And
That is a false analogy. Jesus was tempted in every way that we are tempted, but he did not sin. He never sinned because God cannot sin. So, can he be tempted? He took on flesh. He was tempted in many ways, but he will not sin. He cannot sin. It's not about a free will choice. That's an assumption that is put into text. Since we believe he is God by his spirit nature, he can't sin and will not sin, but he can be tempted in all things. Just like the Bible talks about, don't test God, don't tempt God, don't test him. Doesn't mean God's going to be tested or tempted, but you're not supposed to from a human perspective. So again, these are just things that are false analogies. It's not against the Trinitarian. You have to believe, of course, Jesus is fully human in order to come to this conclusion that he's bringing out here. But Trinitarians have no problem because he's still God. He will not sin and cannot sin, and it's not in his divine nature to do so. But it doesn't mean because he's in the flesh he can't be tempted. He can and was.
that's just outside the realm of what Trinitarian offers. If he is truly God, then he cannot sin in virtue of his nature and virtue of being one person. I really don't think he addressed that at all. He just kept asserting.
I did. He cannot sin. I said that in my debate too. He cannot sin and will not sin, but he can be tempted. He didn't sin. I'm not sure. There's no point to this at all, actually, because it doesn't help him, and it's not an argument that I used. So
God could never actually save anybody through a man. Like that was pretty off. Okay, places I think I could have done better. I'm definitely unfamiliar with the Peshitta. Uh,
Who
so
isn't?
yeah, so I mean I know that like obviously it's later than like the earliest text of the
Yeah,
Greek New Testament.
yeah.
I knew that, but
The
I think
Peshitta.
I think I could
Yeah,
have done better on that.
yeah. Let's circle back to that. What else were you going to say?
So
Areas where you said you could do better.
I think it would have been better for me to press him on some of his earlier statements. So, he asked to actually make it 20-minute openers. And the more I do these debates, the more I actually think it's probably better to be shorter. And the reason why is because then we can actually focus on just one or two things. Like, really, that whole debate could have just been about whether the name Yahweh is a name like we think of any other
Yeah,
name. Like,
yeah.
just that alone is like the core of my position, and for him to refute that I think supports his. But you get 20 minutes, you can like it's hard to handle a dozen claims, so I sort of wish I
Well,
had focused a bit
his
more.
claims were not necessarily logical. They were linguistic. They were very finely tuned statements spoken very quickly, but they were not. Uh, he wasn't building based on facts that were available to everyone and that are clear.
Yeah.
They were.
So this was a debate on whether Jesus is Yod Heh Vav Heh, is Yahweh. Um, Logic. I used academic linguistics to show the language within the language that Jesus is called and is referred to as Yahweh. So that's what the debate was about. The foundation was built upon the linguistics of the scriptures because that's what we have to determine is from the Greek, from other translations like the Aramaic Peshitta or even our Hebrew New Testament manuscripts we now have. You know, the Septuagint as far as how it's used and the different Greek abbreviations of the name. This was all part of the debate, building on the evidence of is Jesus Yahweh. That's what the debate is. It's not about trying to reason or logically discuss how God exists in what way, or that's why I said early on about the Trinity, which we're going to get into. This wasn't about the Trinity versus that show or don't show the Trinity. This was on is Jesus Yahweh, and my point was he's called Yahweh directly by identity, by Mike's own use of logic as well as in the Hebrew of identity versus predication. That's what this was about, not about trying to reason or rationalize in what way is Jesus Yahweh. So this, I built it off the language because that's what we're reading, which we're going to see how they're going to deviate from this and go a different direction.
Idiosyncratic, in other words. And that I think really threw me off where because I don't really watch these things anyhow. I just listen. So I'm not looking at his PowerPoints. I'm just listening. I'm just like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Like, I didn't even understand it until I went back and actually looked at his PowerPoints because he didn't even cite the verse in the audio. It's just, he just said, oh, well, everyone can see it. So, but then when I look back at it,
I believe I did cite every verse. First Corinthians, Jude, I said it all. So I'm not sure why you didn't hear that. I look back in the debate. Yes, I did use my PowerPoint because it's a visual. But if he was listening, I'm pretty sure I said the verses that I was used from Matthew to Jude, First Corinthians, and so forth. So I'm not sure what he's talking about there.
I was like, oh, he has like some really weird ideas that are not universal in Christianity or in scholarship or in anything in Trinitarian Christianity. And so as a result,
that's a typical statement from Unitarians is they try to take a scholar or someone who has a position and try and say, well, no scholar holds this, or they try to blanket it as if there's no agreement. So amongst Trinitarians, everyone agrees that Jesus is Yahweh. The Trinity, it reflects Jesus being Yahweh and two others. The concept of Jesus being Yahweh is Trinitarian. We might have, now within scholarship in Trinity, we might have different maybe views of interpretation of certain passages, which we're going to get into. But the overall theme of is Jesus Yahweh, every Trinitarian scholar says yes, period. And how and in what way is the question that we discuss against Unitarians. But they do this. They try to make it sound like most Trinitarian scholars are alone in their position when they make a claim or they say something, which we're going to see, and it's just not true. So they always make these generalized statements, and this is nothing against them personally. I'm not trying to attack them personally, but I'm saying is these are common arguments against Trinitarian scholars. I saying, well, it's really not in this way or historically or this or there. So if a Trinitarian scholar comes out with a position that maybe it's not 100% agreed upon by Trinitarians, they like to say, well, it's not the common understanding, but yet there are Trinitarian scholars on both sides, even within the scholarship of dealing with the Trinity. Some might hold to certain views, some might differ, but they all agree on the Trinity and the idea and the foundation of where it comes from and what it says. So again, this doesn't help. It just shows that they have to always discredit a biblical scholar's position based on if it has to be 100% agreed upon by other ones or it doesn't. And if it's not, then they're in a disagreement. Just like Unitarians don't agree on everything within their own in-house. I've had Unitarians tell me one thing and another one tells me another. Even some of their scholars of Dale, Tuggy, and Smith. It doesn't make a difference. So, but that's how they do things sometimes.
To that, and he doesn't like actually explain any of those things. He just like, oh, this I'm assuming this unstated assumption, and on the basis of that, this case works. So there was a lot of that, whereas your opening statement was using just common sense reasoning that everyone has access to. So I think you definitely like. I'm sure Al Garza's crew that always listens to his stuff and thinks the way he does about the Aramaic and all this stuff. Like, I'm sure they were just like, not at all convinced by you because you didn't engage on any of those points. But like everybody else that's not an Al Garzaite, if I could put it that way, has no idea what he was talking about, including me, who has a lot of experience in Bible stuff and multiple degrees. I know, I understand the words coming out of his mouth, but I don't think they mean what he thinks they mean.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of a really interesting contrast where you're just like using regular everyday language and he has kind of like this specialized jargon that he was, I don't know if this jargon is the right, specialized form of argument that he was using. So
Can I make a comment here?
yeah, please.
Yeah, so that is intentional. It's very intentional. I'm trying to speak very simply. I want to. I love how you said just being accessible, very normal way of thinking about it, just the words. I just want people to read the Bible, be able to understand its plain, sort of meaning. Not to say that there aren't some things we could go deeper on, looking at original words, context, history, all that stuff definitely matters. But I'm so intentional about trying to make it simple, making a lot of the work that I read by you, by other people at the UCA, by other scholars, just condense it, make it super simple. Okay, that said, it makes me feel a little insecure sometimes because I know I'm going in to speak with a PhD and I know he's going to hit us with a bunch of jargon. And I feel like people are used to that in Trinitarianism, like people just kind of pulling the wool over their eyes. I was speaking with Dale Tuggy, whom, he, I thought, made a good comment. He's like, when people listen to something like this, even though all the things you pointed out, his views are kind of fringe. He says a lot of things that really are not even common in Trinitarianism. But because Trinitarians have a bias towards Trinitarianism, like
There's not one thing they brought out that he said that is a fringe, other than disagreements maybe on even Psalm 110:1, but even most of those scholars agree with certain positions in there. It's not a fringe, or I'm not sure what he means by fringe. My positions are consistent with Trinitarian theology. Like I said, we might have a disagreement on certain interpretations of a passage, whether it's Trinitarian passage or not. I might say this to me is Trinitarian. Another scholar of Trinity might say, well, not. I don't look at it that way. There's better passages to support the Trinity, but that's an in-house discussion based on interpretation. There's nothing that I said regarding the nature or Trinity of God, regarding the deity, the Messiah as Yahweh. That's a fringe. Other than we want to deal with, we're going to get into linguistics, which these men, which I know Sean says he's been a student for 30 years, whatever he says, but there's going to be a point here where we're going to have to correct just simple academic understanding of the text and how scholars interpret and read manuscripts as far as using all available manuscripts in multiple languages. That's just how it works. But let's continue.
they're likely to just kind of accept that. Um, where that makes it a bit more challenging, I think, for me, because now I'm having to try and dismantle something that's really not common. At the beginning, I pointed out that, even Trinitarians, a lot of Orthodox, believe that Jesus is only Yahweh through predication. So, all those little things I think matter. And I certainly have to learn how to, I don't know, say it simply but confidently. I'm still learning how to do this right.
Well, you have to separate your internal and your external. How you felt is not necessarily how we saw you or how you came across. Okay. So I'm just speaking for myself. You came across to me as confident and as somebody that's just like, Al, what you're saying here is not mainstream among your own people. Right. So I think, maybe internally you might feel some of this anxiety, but I think honestly you came across really well. And one of the most incredible things was Al's rebuttal, where he did not rebut a single one of your points. And instead, he just repeated his opening statement,
Yeah.
which tells me one of two things. Either he did not listen to what you're saying at all, or he could not come up with arguments, that fast. I mean, it's right on the fly, right? To respond. Either he wasn't listening, he couldn't come up with something, or he just didn't think it was worthwhile, and he just rather repeat his, he was just like cheating in a sense. Like, I'm just going to repeat my talking points because
This made me laugh because my rebuttal was based on Mike's comments of that nowhere is Jesus ever called Yahweh. So I went back to my points of saying these verses, which I have others with the time that we had, I can only bring out these by the languages show that Jesus is called Yahweh by identity. He is. A is B. Um, this you don't want to hear. I didn't want to deal with the church history or these other areas of the arguments because that's not the topic of the debate. I could be glad to pull out more slides and take more time on early church history, the idea, the concepts of the Trinity, all these things in the Bible, which they're gonna make a comment about. But the debate is Jesus Yahweh? A is B by identity, and not church history or other areas that I felt would have taken more time that wasn't relevant to the debate. This is why debates have topics like, is the Trinity in the Bible? Is Jesus called God? Is Jesus called Yahweh, or is he Yahweh? I mean, these are topics of debates that has to be focused on what the debate discussion is, not that title and then branch out into other areas that have no relevance to what we are debating about. So again, I wasn't going to take the time to try and argue about church history or Greek concepts uh, that wasn't relevant to this debate on is Jesus Yahweh? A is B. Is he identified this way? If he is, then the next discussion can, if we both agree he is it by identity or predication? Because by the rule, it's identity, and then how is he that way? That's a whole different discussion. I'm not sure how they understand how debates go. Um, Typically, that's when you stay on topic of whatever the debate is, and you don't try and deviate from there because that goes off into a whole different debate. And so this is where I think they don't. I'm not sure how they understand how debates go in relation to topics and what we are supposed to do to debating about, not church history or other areas. Mike never once and didn't touch on any things that I said regarding the linguistics because he's not trained in that. So again, I understand that, but this is debating on is Jesus Yahweh by identity. So, but let's continue.
I don't want to give any quarter to his thoughts. Did you notice that in the
Oh,
moment?
absolutely. And 2 or
So I
3
thought that was really
times.
weird.
Yeah, in his rebuttal, so he holds the positive, so he goes first, right? So when he did his rebuttal first, he's like restating his intro points, his presentation, just like you pointed out. And then he would say things like, Michael never addressed this. Michael never pointed this out. I'm like, dude, I was giving my opening presentation, right? Like, I haven't even had a chance really to rebuttal you.
That's not what I said in my rebuttal. I wasn't. I was actually criticizing Mike's opening about what he says isn't that what he said. Jesus is never called Yahweh. I was rebutting that. Um, I don't remember, and I went back and I watched it. I never said that I was arguing that Mike never addressed these things regarding his opening, um, in that way. I made because I was making comments that Mike has made in other videos he's made, referring to things that he's done and said in other videos where he never addresses certain things that others have put out, but that wasn't in regards to his opening. As him talking about rebutting anything. So there's a misunderstanding there. But again, they don't want to clarify. They're just going to assert or assume that that's what I was referring to or talking about. So, no, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about videos that Mike has made and made other comments in other positions, other times. So,
I don't like that when people, just because they go second, they turn their opening into a rebuttal, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that didn't make sense either to me.
That I don't mind that, just for the record. But
Okay.
that is a debater's trick to do the first rebuttal and say, "Oh, my opponent hasn't responded to any of my points." That should, like, honestly, at that point the moderator should have a whistle.
Again, I never said that in my rebuttal. I was referring to his opening statement and things he said before in other videos based on his belief. So again, this is all an error on their part for assuming that that's what I go back and look at my rebuttal. Point out my timestamp where I said I was talking to Mike about he never responded in his opening to anything I said. That's this is not even anything that I said. This is what makes me laugh because I don't know how well they actually watched the debate and paid attention, but this is their response, and it's wrong. I'm sorry, but it's wrong.
And should blow that whistle and be like, foul. He is not supposed to respond to your points. He's supposed to give his opening.
Yeah.
So you get minus 2 point, like in football, like you get a flag, right? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
subtract some time from the guy. Like that should be illegal. Come on.
Yeah.
Maybe we just need a little more active moderation. And then same thing with the cross X. The cross X, like where he's supposed to be asking you questions, he was using that to preach, like
Mm-hmm.
straight up. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't even making interrogative statements. He would ask you a question and then he would just go off and make all these declarative statements. And the moderator did not come in.
It's amazing how Unitarians view certain things versus others. I mean, I'd ask Mike a question. If he didn't answer correctly, I had to either clarify it or explain it to him in a better way that he could understand what I'm trying to say. Because Mike would not couldn't answer the question properly because I don't think he understood what I was trying to say, my point in my question. So I have to stop and say, okay, Mike, this is what I'm trying to say. And I have to give him a whole teaching lesson. I don't preach. I'm not a preacher, but I teach. I'm a teacher. That's what I do. So I had to teach him what I was trying to say from linguistics, and hopefully he can understand and then answer the question if he agrees with it or not. So Sean here is assuming that I'm preaching when I'm trying to explain to him exactly what I was doing with Mike. I was trying to teach him what my question is about, and hopefully that Mike can understand it. But apparently that didn't come out the way Sean did it. So um, it's this is what happens sometimes. It's just um, I mean, things get misunderstood. I'm not preaching. I'm trying to explain to Mike what my question is about, and I'm trying to help him understand it because he doesn't understand it because he's not academically trained. And Sean doesn't recognize that either, apparently, that I'm not preaching. I don't preach. I'm not a preacher. But I am trying to clarify to Mike what my question is. So,
You didn't really complain about it either. And the moderator did not come in and say, blow the whistle. Excuse me, that's not a question. Minus 1 minute for your.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I would like to see, a little more active moderation. I mean, not that he didn't step in at all. And he seemed like a really great guy. I don't want to be too critical. But I think I would like to have seen a little more of that. What would you say is the response been like so far? I mean, I know it's only been a couple of days, but you got a ton of views, almost 200 comments. What's it been like?
So I've got a lot of positive feedback.
I'm going to jump a little bit here, get to some of the main things. That way, I mean, I've got a lot of feedback the same way, positive from Trinitarians, positive from Unitarians. I've gotten the same thing, so it doesn't prove anything, obviously, because I've got a lot of feedback on both ends. So it's just a matter of what we're presenting, if it's factual or not. But I'm gonna move a little forward here.
Feedback for sure. All this is a learning experience. I
That's
gotta.
that's nonsense. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Oh my goodness. Look, man, I had spent probably 20 years working on biblical languages, right? Greek and then Hebrew. Like I haven't even started on Aramaic yet. Like I am gonna get there. There is 1% of the Old Testament that is written in Aramaic, and that's why it's significant, right?
Mhm.
But it's like, okay, so after you master the biblical languages, the Aramaic that the Old Testament is written in, now you're supposed to learn Syriac, which is a cousin of Aramaic, so you can read some 5th century translation of the New Testament. Who
Yeah.
cares?
Yeah.
This is interesting. Who cares? The problem is that every scholar cares. Every scholar cares about languages. We base our understanding of scripture from the languages they were written in and even translated in, to help us understand better what how these manuscripts were being put out there. So yes, Hebrew and Aramaic, or the Peshitta, the Syriac Aramaic, close relations. The Greek, even the Greek. I mean, look. I mean, scholars. The Greek is in some cases a translation of what Jesus said and taught, what you would have spoken in Hebrew, not Aramaic. I'm not an Aramaic, but these people assume I'm an Aramaic premise. I believe that Jesus was a Hebrew speaking Jew, that he taught as the Messiah in Hebrew to his disciples, and you're going to see a Greek translation of those teachings. I see even Aramaic. You have, I don't know any serious scholar who does not uphold the languages as helping understand the scriptures as a whole by looking at the languages there, especially if they're Semitic languages or Semitic type of languages. So for him to say who cares, that just shows the mindset that they really don't care about the truth of what the text is supposed to say, because that's what we look at. So this is why I think there's a problem, and this is where I think they go off a little bit on a different area that has nothing to do with the debate, but on criticizing me and how I brought my answers or my responses to Mike.
You know what I mean? Like, I
Right.
can't imagine getting down on you for not knowing the Syriac Peshitta. I don't know anyone that knows the Syriac Peshitta, like other
Yeah.
than Syriac Christians and like weird Aramaic primacy people. Um, like Garza, I think he thinks the New Testament was written in Aramaic originally, and so he had
Mhm.
this like whole focus on Aramaic.
So this is the other error they make. I do not believe the scriptures were originally written in Aramaic. I do have a different perspective of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek manuscripts that we can look at. As I wrote a book on this, The Search for the Language of the New Testament, and where I build the case of the early church fathers on how they understood Hebrew New Testament manuscripts versus the Greek. So I'm not an Arab. This is they don't do their homework. Anybody who even looks at my channel for scrolls down will see the Hebrew manuscripts and my personal thoughts on these, as well as what scholars think, as well as my arguments for Hebrew, Greek, and yes, even Aramaic. These that the Gospels and New Testament would have been written and translated in the three major languages: Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. And we see this even within the Greek itself, with Aramaic words, Hebrew words transliterated into Greek. Early church fathers that testified to these things. So again, these men don't know. And like I said, all it does is a quick research on me on my YouTube channel or my bio, and they don't do it. They just assume. They assume with error. And this is why I think Unitarians don't do enough research or homework. A quick Google search of my name, go to my bio, my website, and there you go. No confusion. I don't believe it was originally written in Aramaic, and that's what they're going to assume because I brought out the Peshitta. They never mentioned once that I brought out Hebrew New Testament manuscripts that we do have. In fact, Sean here is going to say we don't have any. And he's, again, out of ignorance, without doing his homework, we have Hebrew New Testament manuscripts in our possession. Shem Tov is not the only one. We have the complete New Testament in Hebrew in a few different codices, as well as fragments of them. So, again, this is just how men not in the field of academia will assume these things without even actually doing any homework.
But that's not common. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just
Yeah.
said off. I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Thank you. Yeah, so some people I think might be a little bit overcritical. I am still learning, and so yeah, I'm gonna be more on point. Okay, next time about the Aramaic to the best of my ability. Now, some of the Trinitarians, however, who presented some critiques, it seems very clear to me that many people have been taught this narrative that the term Yahweh is like a species term. It's like a category for a type of being. Or you'll hear people say it's an essential term, which is referring to a Platonic distinction, by the way, about the essential characteristics that make something what it is, which is an idea that's not professed in the Bible. They themselves had to debate amongst themselves and each other for hundreds of years on that, about what that even means. And I mean, there's so many barriers they had between Greek and Latin. Like, it's a mess, historically.
Again, we're discussing the Semitic languages of Hebrew, and Sean should know this, that the word Shem in Hebrew, how it's used as far as a name, can reflect a person's nature and character of who they are. This is not foreign to any Hebrew speaker or any Hebrew scholar. It represents the name, but the holder of the name has a representation of what that name is in the sense of referring to the eternal one. Even with Moses, of God saying "I am," and Moses would say, "I will say that He is," versus "I am." And the name, the Tetragrammaton, which is represented by his eternal nature and character. When I brought up Jastrow here, it's and even Brown Jarrett Briggs, it's reflective of the character, and therefore their understanding is it's held by a name of one person because that's anachronistically how they view names. A name is only one person and that's it. And that's not the case with Semitic languages. In this case, with the Divine Tetragrammaton, where a name does represent someone or someone's in the sense of who they are. And this is why I said it's contingent on understanding the scriptures on how God is revealed or how Yahweh is revealed in persons, not person. And this is why Trinitarian debates are important to regard the distinction between one person versus persons and who they are. So this is where they missed that mark from Hebrew and even Sean when he's going to criticize my Brown Jared Brigg, but even with Jasper and others, I just copied and pasted that for the discussing the name of God, reflecting His character, not His personhood, and that's not what it says. But you'll see.
So many Trinitarians don't get that. I remember when I first learned that in the Old Testament, where you see Lord in all caps, what appeared there was actually a proper name. Sean, in the interview I did with you at Converge, that was one of the first things that you brought up. And that was beautiful to me because that was like a big deal.
Yeah.
This is a name, right? God
Yeah.
is a person, he has a name. And it's spoken about all throughout the text about proclaiming the name, professing the name.
No Trinitarian denies the name of God or that God has a name. It is who that name is designated to. Is it designated to only one person or persons? That's the debate. This is where they keep assuming the fallacy of presuppositional errors on the Trinitarian, where we understand what names mean. The question is the name of a single person or persons regarding who they are in regards to their nature and character, or one person? So again, this is the terminology difference is that they will assume on a Trinitarian as if we don't know or we can't explain it. We can. It's just the different meanings of what name is and how a name can be used. That's the difference.
you know, the psalmist asked God to do things for him just for his name's sake, right? Like an essential set of characteristics doesn't have a reputation, right?
Right.
What do you
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's not our Father in heaven, hallowed be your essential set of characteristics, right?
Your divine nature.
Right. So I think Trinitarians don't get that. And
Well, hold on. I think you might be generalizing a little bit here. I think most Trinitarians are just fine to know that the Father in the Bible has the name Yahweh. Uh, I, maybe I'm giving them too much of a benefit of the doubt here,
what I,
but
I
like
mean,
there's
just the
definitely like
ones
this
who
one little
responded.
corner that has this other way of thinking, right?
Yeah, it's at least the people in my comment section.
Yeah.
I don't mean to
These have got to be
overgeneralize.
Garza's people, though, right? Like people that
Yeah.
are agreeing with his way of looking at it.
Hmm.
All right, so let me.
Again, is every Trinitarian scholar that I have spoken to, that I have dealt with, including Michael Brown and even with Heiser and other who have commented on this, the name is not always referred to the name of a single person, but for Trinitarians, it represents the name of the persons of God, not the person of God. That's a difference. And Trinitarian again, I don't know how well they do overgeneralize. Sean's right. It's a generalization that Mike makes a lot, and it's not consistent with understanding how Trinitarians understand the name Yod He Vav or Yahweh. Some scholars or some Christians say Yehovah. It's not understanding. It's clear how we view it. It's just they don't accept it, which is fine. They don't have to, but don't make it sound like we don't know or can't distinguish what a name is. That's the part that a lot of Trinitarians get upset about because Just because you don't accept it doesn't mean what we're saying isn't true. It's still a valid point that we're making. Just you don't have to accept it. It's That's fine because you don't believe in the persons of God. That's fine. That's the point we're making is the name can be applied to the persons, not to a single person alone, and that's it. So that's where this gets divided.
Uh, Let me just pause you there and feel free to sprinkle in more details about response as we go. But I thought it was really interesting what Al Garza's first point was. He said, and this is a direct quote from his slide, he said, "This debate is not about the Trinity or whether Jesus is God. If it is not about, or sorry, it is not about what the early church fathers taught, but rather about whether Jesus is identified in scripture as Yahweh, the God of Israel." Of course, he said Yud He Vav He, which is like just the letters of the name Yahweh, which is like just an unnecessarily snooty way of doing it.
You know, it's snooty. There's nothing. This is what made me laugh. Snooty. He knows my intention of being snooty. There, people use the name differently. Yahweh, Yehovah, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Hashem, Adonai. I'm respectful of those who have different thoughts or opinions. So I just re applied the name to the original Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, which is understood as the Tetragrammaton. I could have said Yahweh, but people would always say, "Well, isn't it? Don't you believe it's Yehovah?" And I would say yes, but I'd have to explain all this. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the easiest way most people understand, even simple people, the Tetragrammaton, God's name, the Lord, all caps. I mean, for him to make us that I was being snooty, it's not snooty. It's just respectful of how the name is amongst other people who have different pronunciations. So again, this is just an attack. It's an ad hominem attack, referring to me as being snooty and all that. So that's the first part. I don't think he knows it, but I mean, he's not trying. I know he's not trying to be ill-hearted about it, but it's I'm gonna look at it that way because it's he's calling me snooty, and I know I'm not snooty. I just have a different opinion on the name.
Um, and then he says, "It seemed like you." So let me make my point here. So he, by saying this, it seemed to me as I was watching this that like he didn't want to talk about the Trinity and he didn't want to talk about church history, which I feel like is a huge win for us, right?
Hmm.
That's like him saying like I think I'm going to lose here, and I don't want to go into the church history because I'm going to get trounced over there. So like instead, we're just going to talk about this little box of things where I can really score some points.
Again, he knows my intent. I guess he knows what I think. I mean, he knows where I'm thinking here. I don't. Again, this is just comical to me because no, I don't think that wasn't the topic of the debate. If the topic of debate was is the Trinity in the Bible or is the Trinity true, then we could talk about the Trinity. I'll be glad to give a dozen PowerPoints on the Trinity. Or is, the early church fathers affirm the Trinity or not, or this. I mean, that wasn't the topic of, again, I read this earlier. The topic was, is Jesus Yahweh? That's what we're discussing here. It's not what the church fathers think about it. It's not whether the Trinity is in the Bible. It's connected, but that's not the topic. So for them to, that's what I'm saying. I don't understand how they know if they really understand how debates work when it comes to a topic, but a big win for him. I'm glad they have that confidence because it's to me it's amusing that they think that because I didn't want to discuss something that wasn't part of the debate topic, that somehow that's a win for them, or that I was afraid or I would lose or something. No, I have books on early church history, volumes of books on the Trinity, volumes of books on the early church fathers in my concordance, like Sean has of all the from the Greek and the Latin and everything. I'm not afraid to discuss these topics. I don't believe at all I would lose. It's just a matter of this wasn't the debate topic that we had agreed upon. I stayed on is Jesus Yahweh by identity, as Mike puts it. A is A. If A is B, then that's it. So that's what it was, not anything else. But I guess that's how they view things in their mind.
Did it seem like that to you? Because like later on, you even brought it up. You're like, we can't talk about Jesus being Yahweh without talking about the Trinity, because you're assuming you're assuming a Trinitarian framework for thinking about these things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Those comments made no sense at all, and I think were really just an attempt to disengage the audience from the really the bigger idea of what we're getting at.
It just didn't make sense to Mike and Sean. The debate topic is clear, no ambiguity about it. It's clear. We're discussing is Jesus Yahweh. If we want to discuss how he's Yahweh in regards to the Trinity, that's a different debate. Again, that is what the debate discussion is Jesus Yahweh. That's it. But again, there's no disengagement here. I'm staying on topic as any debater would. So let's continue.
I mean, so if Jesus is Yahweh, that means he's also God, right? With a capital G. If Jesus is Yahweh, okay, then how, right? Is he? Because I mean, obviously they
You said how he said it right there. How? That's not the debate. How is Jesus Yahweh? That's a different debate. We can discuss that. If we agree Jesus is Yahweh, well, then the debate's over. Now let's have a debate on how is he Yahweh in what way. That's the point. It wasn't about how he is Yahweh. The point is we have to first establish is he Yahweh? If we both agree he is, then we can move forward to say, okay, then how does he exist as Yahweh? What does it all mean? That's the point of debates, is to discuss these issues categorically, which I don't know if they really understand that. But let's continue.
believe the Father and Holy Spirit are also Yahweh. So is Jesus just a part of Yahweh? Is Jesus a mode
Well,
or
and that's interesting
stage?
because he never explained any of the model, any of the
Yeah.
reasoning. He was
Hmm.
just like, Jesus is Yud He Vav He, period. I win.
Because that's what the debate is about. It wasn't about creating the model for the Trinity. Again, I don't know how they understand debates. The model is the debate is not a, and he's right. I could prove that I win. Move on to the next debate. How is he Yahweh? What's the model for the Trinity? I can debate that all day long. I have for years since in my early 20s. It's not an issue. It's the fact that these men are not understanding how a debate topic works and how we're supposed to debate these issues based on the question of the debate, or the title of the debate. But he's going to say some other things that I'll comment on. I think it's important. So let's continue.
But like, he didn't explain. Well, that actually defeats the Trinity. So, but he also, he affirms the Trinity. So he needs to explain what that means.
Yeah.
And
I will be glad to explain it when time comes in a debate. In fact, in my PowerPoint, I talk about the name reflecting all three persons, including Jesus. So I made that point in there, but the debate is not about how or what the Trinity is. Its debate is about is Jesus Yahweh. That's it. So if you want to know my model, I don't have a problem explaining the Trinity. I put a brief snippet in my PowerPoint describing the name applying to three persons and how we view Yahweh as three persons in my debate PowerPoint. That's all that was needed by me. But let's continue.
you're right. Modalism is the most obvious explanation for saying that Jesus is the Father. I mean, it's
Yeah.
literally what Sibelius and those guys were all saying back in the day.
Hmm.
And that's not what Garza affirms. So like he needs to account for that. And he just wouldn't get into it at all. No matter how
Yeah.
hard you push on it, he was just unwilling to go there.
Yeah.
Because it's not the topic of the debate.
Yeah.
Um,
I tried to point it out best that I could. I think there's maybe, one or two comments I made about it.
yeah. So another thing he did is he set up this dichotomy between Greek thinking and Jewish thinking. This is like slide 2 of his.
Yes.
And I don't think you ever really got to engage with it, but I'm going to just say that basically he accuses biblical Unitarians of Greek reasoning, and he claimed that he's using Jewish acceptance. So he quotes this one verse from Paul where it says, well, Greeks want wisdom and Jews want signs. And then Paul actually finishes that line by saying, we give them neither one. Christ crucified, foolishness to the Greeks, and what.
So that wasn't the discussion, what I was trying to say. And again, this is the misrepresentation of what's being done in the text. The clarity was how a Greek mindset thinks versus how a Jewish mindset thinks. It's not about whether Paul granted either one of them their mindset, it's how they think, the way they think about God or what they think about things in general. For the Greek, it's wisdom, seeking answers, trying to figure things out. Where it is a Jewish mindset, and it was based on, how they don't question what things are, but again, what is already been revealed. So again, the revelation is clear. They believe it. They accept it. It's not about trying to figure things out like we used to hear them try to do. How is he this way? In what way? Jews didn't do that. When God said something, it's God said. If God revealed this way, that's it. We have to do this and explain it because men like this and others who reject and deny what the scriptures say regarding the nature of God come up and trying to explain it differently, then yes, we're forced to have to try to explain it as well. And that's where we get into the weeds on this because we have to explain something that should be just accepted in Scripture of what God says and not question it. So that's the difference.
Whatever to the Jews. So it was like totally an example of a verse taken out of context, made to mean something new for this new context where he's going to claim to be the Jew. And then he affirms the Greek theory of the Trinity.
Yeah. Yeah. And
What
and
did you
you
think about all that?
It's not a Greek theory. This is funny, and I'm glad Sean's laughing because it is comical on his part that this is not a Greek theory. We have to explain it to appease Greek thinking people. So in other words, we have to get to that level of Greek thinking and have to explain something so they understand it because they don't want to understand it. We accept it if the scripture says it's so, but they want to say, "Well, how? Explain this. How do you do?" So now we have to get into that same mindset. It's no different than Paul, who knew Hebrew, Greek, and even Aramaic and the oral traditions of what was being spoken of in the Targum. uh, Paul dealt with the Greeks a certain way. He dealt with his Jewish brethren one way. It's the mindset. The fact that we have to explain it is that yeah, we have to get into the Greek text, the mindset of these gentlemen because they are in that mindset. If if I don't have to try to explain it, I say this is what the scripture says. That's it. I accept it. But then these gentlemen come along and say, well, you have to explain that because to me, in my logical reasoning, that doesn't make sense. That's illogical. That's where you get atheism and agnostics doing the same thing. Your Bible's full of all these weird stories and all these things. If the Bible says it, that God created all things, or that Moses did this, and if these miraculous signs and things are revealed, I believe it. I don't have to ask, how did God do that? That doesn't make sense to me. No, this is where atheism and agnostics they start to get into criticizing Christianity because of this type of thinking, and that's where I try to avoid it. But we have to sometimes get in that pull with them and try to explain to them, okay, let's use Greek and reasoning like you do to explain it because it still fits, it still works, we can still explain it, but they won't accept it.
so I did call that one out. I didn't get to go in depth, but I did call out that the whole idea around, well, Unitarians reject God because they're trying to fit, the infinite God into their, 3 pound
Yeah,
brain or
yeah,
whatever. But
yeah.
in reality, he used a whole
You see the little shots they take, 3 pound brain. I mean, this is stuff where we get criticized for being rude, but when they make these ad hominem attacks about Trinitarians, about 3 pound brains, what are we supposed to think? We take it as an insult and then we respond. And then they say, well, you're just being rude because you insulted us. When you insult our intellect or the way we do things in insulting ad hominem way, then we respond in the same way. So Mike doesn't. I don't know. Mike doesn't really catch himself, but and Sean's not catching it. But I'm rude in the sense that because I point this out or criticize him back, 3 pound brain. I don't know what, but yeah, I think you understand.
lot of reason. He used logic. The whole distinction between identity versus predication, I think, is a inaccurate philosophical distinction. His view depended upon that very thing, right? So I think he refutes himself by making this case that, you can't really understand the Trinity with your mind, and somehow that supports it. That's just ridiculous. But in fact, he is using his mind to explain God to us.
I never said that. I never said you can't understand God in your mind or any way. I just said you cannot. In fact, my part point, we're not trying to. No one agrees, and I mean everyone agrees. You cannot fully comprehend who God is from eternity past and so forth. There is a limit to um, us understanding God because we're not God. If you could fully understand everything about God in every way, then you yourself would be God yourself. So just because there is a you know a way of not fully understanding or comprehending God in all His ways doesn't mean that the Trinity isn't true. Um, that's a fallacy in itself. I can understand what the scriptures reveal, what they say about God. I'm not going to question. They want to question and say, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, it shouldn't have to make sense. That's just what the text says. If God says it, it's true. It's these men who want to question it and say, well, you need to explain it and how that's even possible, because that doesn't follow logically. Well, okay, then we have to get into that area, and I don't mind doing so. It's just a matter of then they try to equate it as if we're being like-minded against the scriptures as well, and we're not. So, but let's go.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah. I was trying to think of what that's called. Okay. And I thought of the phrase "the pot calling the kettle black," right? Because like they're both black. So
yeah.
like you're using reasoning, he's using reasoning, but he's like, "Oh, you're such a Greek," right?
Yeah.
And I asked AI, I'm like, "What is that called? Is there like a fallacy for that, or what is it called?" And it just said, "No, it's not a fallacy. It's just projection, where you're
Mhm.
putting on somebody else what you are, whether you're aware of it or not."
Mhm.
So he was projecting that onto you. And the fact is, you are using common sense reasoning. Absolutely. No question about it. But so did Jesus in his teaching ministry. So you can find it among the prophets. There's just like a basic level of common sense reasoning that every human uses. Doesn't matter what your culture. So it's not distinctively Greek. What's distinctively Greek is talking about ousia, the sense of being, and then redefining a name that identifies a person as a substance.
Yeah.
That's super Greek. And that was
Yeah.
his whole
I
case.
know, right?
Again, this is the again another fallacy of even straw manning. We we look at scripture and what it says. In culture and context does matter. Apparently, he says it's so simple. Any culture, and that's not true at all. Every culture has their way of saying things and doing things because they have an English Bible. They think it should be read simply as it states in English. But then when you bring out the English ourselves, if we say, "Look, it's right here, Jesus God," well, they'll go, "Well, let's go to this at this time." And Mike has done this, and everyone else has, "Oh, look at all the words used in this range of Semitic times," and they do the same thing when it fits their view. So they don't follow that. If it was simply as read in the English as they want to, then they would probably be Trinitarians. But to the fact that they have to appeal to the language themselves, they have to go to the Old Testament and look at they themselves look at how it's used in this culture and the Jews, and they do the same things. So when we do it, they criticize us. But when I do it, they criticize me. When they do it, it's perfectly sound and reasonable. Uh, it's it's the hypocrisy of this conversation that I'm supposed to be projecting something when I'm actually not. I'm just stooping to their level to put in the Greek mindset of reasoning and logic so they can understand what the scripture says plainly, which I would accept even without Greek reasoning or logic behind it. So
That's like where it comes from. Every time he says God is one being in three persons, you are in Greek philosophy world territory.
Yeah. So one of the things he said, and you already kind of mentioned this about the name of God. When he first went through it, he said, "Okay, the name of God is YHVH or Yod He Vav He," which we translate usually to Yahweh. And he says, "Well, this is related to the verb to be, which is Haya." And he's like, "Well," and then he went through all these different tenses. He's like, "The past tense uh, is Haya, and then the present tense is Hove, and then the future tense is Yihye." And I was as somebody that like studies Hebrew and reads Hebrew almost every day, as I'm like trying to like develop fluency, which I'm not as fluent as I would like to be yet. Um, I was thinking to myself, there's no present tense verb for to be in Hebrew. Like, what are you talking about? So I was asking my good Hebrew expert friend, ChatGPT. I was like, I've never come across hoye. Like, it sounds like that's what it would be if it existed. It sounds right for a present tense participle. But I'm like, I've never seen, like, does that occur in the Bible? And the AI is like, no, it's not in the Bible. It's in some later Aramaic translations. And then I'm like, oh, that's right. So like Al Garza is this like Aramaic guy, and he's retrojecting his Aramaic understanding into the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
This made me laugh. Hove, Aramaic, and ChatGPT. That's his source. So I decided to post down below under this, which you can link. Go to this video directly, and I replied to this by pointing out that I can play the same game. So I went to Grok and I copied and pasted my slide and said, where Hove is this, I simply said, is this correct in Hebrew? And Grok says, yes, it is. And it gives a breakdown of how it's correct, and even how, if you're looking at from the call form, the simple form, or the hiffle form, that's going to change the tenses and how it's understood. This gentleman here is looking at it from the hiffle form. I'm looking at it to the call form. Now, the call form is a simple form of I am, and that Grok points out, and like I said, I posted the response from AI, how it contradicts exactly what he just said, to show that I'm from the understanding that it's a simple form, not the hiffle, and that most scholars are converting to that simple form. So he's wrong. And I posted it. You can read. You can read. Go to click on the link there to go to his web page and look at my comment. It's from Grok. The fact that we have to start using AI based on prompting it so that he can say I'm wrong is laughable, and it's ridiculous that Unitarians are relying on AI instead of actually. And he says he's learning the language from who, AI? Because that's it's, and it depends how you prompt it. You could prompt ChatGPT, and all I said was, is this correct from Hebrew? And I posted my PowerPoint section on that verb, and it said yes, and it gave a breakdown, and it talked about the hiffle form and the call form, and how they differentiate. And he's looking at it from this way. Again, untrained, unlearned in the simple way of how to look at this, and just randomly saying these things without actually checking it out or even seeing where I'm getting this from. So I posted Grok there, so I'll wait to see if he replies to what Grok said, because his chat GPT didn't get the full understanding.
Yes.
And like, there just is no word for is in Hebrew, in
Mm.
ancient Hebrew. Okay. So Hoye maybe came, or Hove maybe came along later, but in biblical Hebrew, it's not there. So I thought that was kind of like a really interesting fact check thing. But like, his main point with the name, as you already said, is to somehow say that the name does not refer to an individual.
Yeah.
It refers to a quality of being that you have always been, eternality, basically. You've always been,
Yes.
you're always going to be. But like, I don't know, like, he didn't offer any evidence at all. And I, like, when I saw you arguing against it, I'm like, I don't even know how do you even argue against this?
I argued it from the grammar and from even Brown Driver Briggs Complete Edition. I even showed you Jastrow here, character, nature, that the Hebrew word Shem can be used either way, depending on the context and how it's being used. Reflective to God's verb, the verbs for the eternal nature of I am, He is, the verb to be. Again, they're this it seems like they just don't want to listen, or they're just so convinced that anything anybody says goes right over their head, and they're just focused on their own understanding, and that's it. So
Like, he hasn't made a case for it. Like, he just like said, well, the word Yahweh is related to the word Hayah, and here are the three tenses. Okay, well, we could say the word Ezekiel is related to the words, like strength of God or power of God or something like that, right? That doesn't prove that like Ezekiel is God's actual power. Like names are always like named after something. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yonatan means Yahweh's has given. Natan is the word for give. It's like Nathan, right? God gave. So that doesn't mean that it's just a name, man. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you should take it like literally according to its etymology. Like, yes, there's a relationship there, sure. Like Israel wrestled with God, and then his name was called Wrestles with God, right?
He just gave an example to refute his own comment. It's just a name, man. You don't go to be. Oh, but you know what? The etymology, yeah. I mean, wrestle God. He's called him. It's not. It's a name that represents who Yahweh is in the name. The name reflects who he is. He's eternal, the one who always is. He was, he is, and he will be. That's the name. It's represented that way in Hebrew by the verbs and how it comes. It's found in Exodus that way. It's not just a name. And the fact that he refuted himself, even with the name Israel, that's how it's given. When Moshe was drawn out. Moshe means to draw out his name because he was drawn out of the river. That reflects where he came from and how he was saved. The eternal nature of God's name reflects who he is by his character, his nature. It's not just a name by a person, and that's it. That's only reflective of Unitarianism. But for Trinitarians, that name is represented by three persons who are given that name. That's the point.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. Did you ever feel like you ever were able to disprove that in that conversation, or were you just like, I don't know? It seemed like you had some heated exchanges about this whole name subject.
Yeah, it's because there was a lack of focus and there were so many different claims going on. It did make it difficult, but I mean, it really is just refuted in the simplicity of how names are used, right?
Yeah.
So Yahweh checks every box of a personal name, right? And the
Yes.
people in scripture like use it as a name in the same way they use human names, right? So it doesn't behave like an attribute or a category. And like all names, yeah, it has a meaning, but its meaning does not cancel out the fact it's still a name, right? So I think hopefully just through presenting a lot of scripture on it, people were able to just get that gist, and especially during the cross exam, right? So
In the
just like
cross
you,
exam, you got so heated at that.
yeah,
I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something about the name. And you're like, all right, Al, does God have a name? Okay, what is it? Do you
yeah,
remember
right,
that?
yeah. So it was from John 5:43, right? Where Jesus says, I have come in the Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you will receive. And so this is essentially, I believe, a clear concession that the Son does not have the same name as the Father. So the question is, what is the Father's name? Right? If that's Yahweh, then this is explicitly stating that that's not the name of the Son. And there are other passages like this in John 17 where he's like, I magnify your name, right?
This is a common root fallacy where they take a certain word like name and they universally apply it everywhere as it has to be meant the same way. As I just showed you in Jastro's, that's not how it's used. It actually, if you just remember, it says character. You can go as name, title. Um, it's a root fallacy. It doesn't always just mean a name, even by the authority of someone else. But if I come in the name of the king, I'm coming in by the authority of that king. Jesus as the Messiah, the man who is again one of the persons of Yahweh, comes a man and he's under the obedience of the Father. Of course, he's going to do those things and come in the Father's name because he is reflecting himself as the Messiah, the servant of God in bodily form. It doesn't mean he's not God or he's not one of the persons of God that we've already discussed earlier. So, again, this is just typical root fallacy, which I might skip, but we'll continue.
I have made known to them your name. And a big thing he kept doing was just asserting that this just refers to God's authority, to some quality of God. Again, he's like assuming that it's functioning like an attribute or a category, but that's just not the case. I mean, that so when I'm at like I'm just trying to press him and be like, okay, does the Father even have
That is the case when you look at how the root words are used and don't you just don't root word fallacy and say this is how it has to mean every single time. The context discernment determines what the word is reflecting, and in that context, he's referring back to the authority of the one who sent him by name. It's all it's saying. I mean, it's so simple in its complete Jewish context. But they don't see that because they anachronistically want to put the name as universally in a root fallacy, and that's it.
a name, right? Does he have a name? And he just couldn't answer. He like
See,
wouldn't
now that's where
answer it
you were getting
straight.
frustrated too, because you're like,
Yeah.
"Look, I know you know this," and he's
Yeah,
like,
right?
"I'm not gonna answer it. I'm not gonna answer it."
Yeah, and it's oh man, it was frustrating because in some other way where if the fact Yahweh is a name suits Trinitarianism, then they'll bring it up, right? Then you'll yeah, of course he has it. But when you want to press that to expose something inconsistent within their view, they just ignore it.
So he's citing the BDB, which is an old Hebrew lexicon, Brown, Driver, and Briggs, which said name. He literally quoted the dictionary definition of Yahweh. Okay, the entry on Yahweh, and he quoted it as follows. He said, "Name, comma, as a designation of God, semicolon, as embodying the revealed character." The dictionary that he quotes to prove that the name is not really a name, that it's really just an attribute, like the very first word it said is name.
I'm not sure if Sean knows how to read a lexicon, but it says name there because that's I'm looking up the Hebrew word for name, Shem. So that Hebrew it says name, Shem, that's the word I'm looking at in section 3 when referring to God, reflecting the character of God. That's what it's saying. I'm not sure if Sean knows how to read a lexicon or understand that first name there is what the Hebrew word category section 3 of that Hebrew word how it's used. Lexicons have different ways of how some word is used, and that number 3 for the name of God when reflecting to God is reflecting the character that when it says Shem, the name. And I gave the examples. I just copied and pasted it so they can see it's not my interpretation. I don't know if Sean knows how to read a lexicon properly, but that's why it says name right there because it's reflecting what Shem name. It's defining what it means when it talks about the name of God, in reflection of His character. So I'm not. That part is confusing.
And
Yeah, right.
designation is just like another word for a name, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it just I don't know. It was just such a weird way of thinking about the subject, and it really should have been made clear prior to your debate, which I don't.
Or the Father's Yahweh, like saying, Fido is a dog,
Mhm.
right? Or category, or the Father's Yahweh.
Trying to like derail the debate literally from his like second or third slide.
Yeah.
Like just take it off the tracks and put it on a different track and be like, all right, we're actually talking about this thing over here.
Hmm.
Which is just like such a weird thing to do.
Yeah, and like when we apply that to other concepts in Trinitarianism, I think it would become more clear to Trinitarians that it is pretty weird. So I mean, is saying Jesus is Yahweh or the Father is Yahweh like saying, Fido is a dog,
Mhm.
right? Or Fido is dog, rather you would say, dog as this universal category.
Yeah.
No, like it never functions that way, right? And
Again, it's a straw man, and he's trying to box in what Yahweh is with logic. Fido, dog, Fido. I gave him a valid reason, an argument earlier that I did in my other video, where if I asked Mike a valid question, do all mortal men have one and one only biological father? He'll say yes. Jesus is, and the second question is Jesus just a mortal man? Well, yes. Then, valid conclusion then Jesus has one and only one biological father. He's going to say no because he's from the virgin birth. Okay, but it's still a valid argument. It's just defining the terms and how we see what the issues are within who God is, who Jesus is, because I could bring up just like atheists and agnostics use that same logic that I just used about all mortal men have biological only have one and only biological father, and Jesus is a mortal man, and so Jesus must have one and only biological father. That's a valid argument. He will disagree with a third point of it, and so we don't have to concede. That's what begging the question is. They do this. They beg the question. It's a lot of question begging from Unitarians. A lot of their questions that they ask are either loaded, straw man, or begging the question, or a lot of root fallacies. That's consistent with them. But let's continue.
He didn't make that clear, and there was a lot of derailing. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And I'm not trying to accuse him of having this as a tactic. Maybe he did, but I can't see inside of his heart to see if it was like done in innocence, like not even.
But he could definitely see a lot what's in my mind because he made a lot of assumptions about what I say and don't say, what I mean, what I don't mean. So as I mentioned earlier.
Realizing what he was doing, or if it was just like kind of a heavy-handed debate tactic just to destabilize his opponent. So when I play cards with my friends, I use Sean
of some of these things, but unfortunately they don't. And that's what I think we're fighting against. It's not just a false belief. It's like helping people identify in truth and
that's because liberal ideas came in, and basically that's how we got this universalism back in the 1800s. Like Unitarianism was huge in England in the 1700s, and then in America as well. And then it just got derailed by this whole liberal thing that came along. And so I'm keen to safeguard against any kind of progressivism in theologically speaking, where you're just like undermining the authority of Scripture. Like I think we got to hold to that.
Yeah.
And I think we have good reasons for that too. Would offer a heretical understanding if they haven't been to seminary. It'd be a red flag, man. That's got to be like, and I think as soon as people start looking into it, they're just like, wait, that's what it means?
Yeah.
I don't even know what.
Yeah.
It's just like mental eyes cross.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no analogy. I don't know. So in Al Garza's case, he offered 1, 2, 3, 4 that I saw, 4 scriptures where Jesus is allegedly called Yahweh. And what was so bizarre about these scriptures, Mike, is that in not one of them was it like a quotation from the Old Testament where it says Yahweh and it's applied to Jesus, because there are those verses like in Romans 10.
Yeah, and the reason I don't use those is because Unitarians have answers of that's by predication. They're sharing the same things. They make these examples. I already knew what Mike would say in regards to predication, that God can use Jesus and do all these things that he does in the Old Testament. So I don't use that because they have answers. I didn't want to give Mike a chance to have to give his answers because that means that they're valid. But again, I stuck with verses that clearly say that Jesus is Yahweh by identity, not predication. I could definitely have dozens of verses reflecting Jesus in the Old Testament where they give the same things that God did, Jesus does, but they have answers for that. Why am I going to waste time? And this is why I think they don't understand for debating wise, but we'll see more.
Mm-hmm.
And like Acts 2, I think, no other name to be saved or something. Like there are places where like the word Lord clearly means Yahweh in the Old Testament context, and it's applied to Jesus. It's not that many. It's like only 2 or 3 or 4. He didn't use any of those. So he used like verses that are just like the word Lord applied to Jesus. And then he said, oh, well, in the Aramaic translation,
yes,
it uses this word Maria, which is the standard word for Yahweh And it's like, who cares? That's
Yeah.
400 years after Christ. 400 years, about the same time as the Council of Chalcedon.
These are the same arguments that Bart Ehrman uses and all these about when these manuscripts are so late. The date of a manuscript, and I don't even know if Sean has ever had training in textual criticism, or even how we look at manuscripts. But even books that I have on my shelf, Daniel Wallace and others, will tell you that the dating of a manuscript does not determine the value of the manuscript. We have old manuscripts of the New Testament that read better than the earliest ones. We know the earliest ones, there might be some corruption here, where the later manuscripts are better. The date has no relevance to the value. This is textual criticism 101. So the fact that they say this shows that they don't know what they're talking about in this area. Secondly, is I gave the Greek, I gave the sacred name abbreviation, how the Greek writers who were copying this, how they understood that in 1 Corinthians 12. They abbreviated that for a sacred name, put a line over it so they would believe this is a title name of either Yahweh or Adonai, and it's by the Holy Spirit. And then I put the Peshitta, how they translated that from seeing probably the Greek or looking at it, and I brought the Hebrew Testament manuscripts that Jews who were translating either from a Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic copy recognize that as a divine name and title, Yahweh Adonai. None of them, they don't touch none of that because they can't. So every scribe who translated and wrote and copied understood that to be a divine title from the Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. Semitic languages and the Greek. This they don't touch the sacred name as far as how it's used in that context and except revealed by the Holy Spirit, by a revelation by the Holy Spirit. Again, these I don't know where Sean gets his training in textual criticism or the languages, but that's just a fallacy right there, plain and simple.
And the dual natures, of course they believe that, and so they put it into their translation. Like,
Yeah.
that's not evidence of anything.
I know. Oof. So well said. Yeah, it's such a subtle thing that he really was arguing for a defense of his sort of weird position regarding the Aramaic and the Peshitta, right? So he was
He was
tying that
assuming it
in.
without actually arguing for it.
Yeah, or making it very clear. He did
Right.
none of that was made clear to the
Yeah. So
audience.
we can agree with him that the word Lord is used in so the first text he brought up was 1 Corinthians 12:3. Just add it to the screen. Therefore, I want you to understand that no one speaking by the Spirit of God ever says, let Jesus be accursed, and no one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. So this word here, Lord, that was like his big point where he's like, oh, look, Jesus just is Yahweh. Okay. But that's not what it says. It just says Lord. And in the Greek over here, you can see it's the word Kyrios. It's just the word for Lord. This is the same word that's used of humans. Abigail calls David her Lord, so
Hmm.
like.
This is the root fallacy. You're seeing it live and in effect. They took the word Lord. Oh, it just means master, Lord. They don't consider the sacred name abbreviation, the identity of that, the earliest Greek manuscripts that we have. They don't consider, yes, the Aramaic understood that Greek word to be the tetragrammaton in the Aramaic, in the Peshitta Syriac Aramaic, and they don't look at the Hebrew manuscripts that we currently have, which he's going to deny because he doesn't know. He has no idea that we actually have 1 Corinthians 12 in Hebrew in about 6 or 7 manuscripts, and they read it as the divine name, either Yod He Vav He directly or Adonai, which is a substitute name. None of them read either either a lordship of lesser human being. Not even the Greek. Earliest Greek manuscripts have the sacred name. It's only later manuscripts when they stopped using that they started writing it in the smaller script, cursive type Greek, where it now became writing out completely. But that's not how the earliest Greek manuscripts read. That's not how the earliest Syriac Aramaic reads. And that's not even how the later Hebrew manuscripts that we have of First Corinthians read, which I have posted many times on other social media websites. You can see them for yourselves. They reflect the Tetragrammaton and the divine name. Both of these men have no clue what they're talking about in this area. because they haven't done that research or homework, and they don't even address it. And I don't say they're talking about in a rude way that they don't that they're dumb or anything, but that they're ignorant, they're not learned or educated in this field. And I thought Sean would know better than that by understanding. I brought out three languages to show evidence of how each copyist and scribe understood 1 Corinthians 12:3. That was the point.
You tried to point this out, but I don't think it ever got through, because he has this idea that, like, no, the Aramaic Bible is a legitimate Bible, even though it's 400 years later. So therefore it must be Yahweh here. But like,
again, the date has no relevance to the value of the manuscript. Okay, zero. That's a textual criticism 101. So, and I'm not an Aramaic guy. I went to three different languages, two Semitic and the Greek. Again, they don't even touch on any of the other ones, okay? Because they just assume that I believe in Aramaic supremacy, which is completely false.
it doesn't say Yahweh.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I was like so frustrated for you, because it's like, look, at least use a Yahweh text applied to Jesus, man. And he just didn't even do that. So I don't know, do you have more comments on this whole idea of Lord? Like, there's not really much there to say. Yeah, Jesus is Lord, but that doesn't mean Yahweh, right?
Yeah, the closest he got was in Psalm 110, that's quoted throughout the New Testament. He also brought up the prepare ye the way of the Lord. Those two verses were the closest that he got, and he blew right past him, right?
Actually, I never brought out prepare you the way of the Lord. Not once in my PowerPoint, not once in the discussion. And in fact, I never used Psalm 110:1. The only reason I brought it up is because he put it in his PowerPoint to criticize me about it. In my PowerPoint, never touched Psalm 110:1 in the quotation. I did cite Jesus referring to that David referred to the Messiah as Kurion, which is, according to the Greek, according to the Aramaic, and according to the Hebrew, it is the divine tetragrammaton or Adonai, either one. I didn't go into Psalm 110:1. I just stopped right there that Jesus is saying, interpreting David of calling the Messiah Kurion, Lord in the sense of the tetragrammaton or Adonai, the divine title. He in his PowerPoint criticized me in Psalm 110:1. I never brought that up. And I never brought up the Mark's introduction of Prepare You the Way of the Lord. Never brought that up. Again, either they weren't listening or they weren't paying attention to anything I said in my PowerPoint. Very well, they not anything, but they selectively took things out and then either misinterpreted or misunderstood and not even applied correctly to what I even said. But this is one of them. I never used Psalm 110:1. He did. And then I in my cross exam said I even said that I never said it, but I'm going to bring it up because you brought it up. I even made that point. Look, you brought up Psalm 110. Let's discuss it because I never used it in my PowerPoint. I stopped where Jesus interpreted David, and that's it. So let's go.
Right, his main texts are like what you're talking about, which really are him trying to double argue for the Peshitta as original, right?
Yeah. So I've
there it is again, Peshitta original. Never did I say that. Never have I ever said that in all my videos, all my other books I've written. I've never made that comment. Again, this is where they strawman me and put me in a strawman fallacy. A lot of fallacies committed here, and that's one of them. And I'm saying it because I know myself. This is a straw man. I never held to Aramaic supremacy. Again, this is what we get.
I've got this pulled up here. So he says, the Lord, all capitals, says to my Lord. And you can see, since I'm using the NRSV, it actually lowercase is the L on Lord there, which is kind of cool because the mainline Christians behind the NRSV are not evangelicals, so they don't need it to actually teach the doctrine.
Yeah.
They can just be honest with what it says.
Right.
But then over here is the Hebrew. There's God's name right there. It says Yahweh Ladoni, right? So the lamed there, that's a prefix. It means two. So it says Yahweh to Adoni, my Lord. And then sit. So this is the command form for sit right there. Sit to my right hand, right? So
Yeah.
he was trying to say that both of these are Yahweh.
Yes.
And
Yep.
that was just like, you guys got into that pretty in depth, and it's like,
I did not say directly that both of them are Yahweh. I said that given the Hebrew understanding from the Greek, not even the Hebrew understanding, but from the Greek, from the Aramaic, and from the Hebrew, you could either look at that as Adonai, because we have a lot of Ladonai in the book of Psalms with the prefix to. We also have La Yahweh, to Yahweh, over 100 times used in the book of Psalms. I quoted the early church father Jerome. I mentioned Jerome. I mentioned based on the interpretation, sorry, Jerome interpretation that's been changed, as well as the Syriac church father of Hebrew and Syriac Aramaic said that it was changed from the Tetragrammaton to Adonai. So the evidence that I used, they don't have to accept it, but it's evidence. And we're going to get into the fact that I believe it's Ladonai, not Ladoni. But I never directly said it has to be the Tetragrammaton twice. I gave evidence for possibilities, and not one of them was for Adoni, because Adoni does not appear anywhere else in the book of Psalms, specifically Ladoni, anywhere. It's only with the vowel points, and we're going to get into this because he's going to bring it up, and I'm going to clarify because, again, they strawman me and misrepresent me.
it doesn't, like, this is the Hebrew. And then he's like, oh, well, I have a manuscript where it says Adonai here instead of Adoni. Okay. And that little, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little dot under the noon there. The noon is like kind of a bracket looking character. And the little dot underneath it is what makes the E sound. And if it was a straight line or like a T symbol like this right up here, it would be an I sound instead of the E sound, right? So it's a very small difference of the vowel under the letter there that's going to go from Adoni to Adonai, right? So he's correct about all that, but like, this is what the manuscript says. And what you brought out was,
So let's be clear, that's not what the manuscripts said. That's what the scribes say. It's a commentary. Any serious Hebrew scholar understands that the nikud, the vowel pointings, are a type of commentary, not just for pronunciation, vocalization, but sometimes for understanding a specific text. It's not considered part of the text as far as inspiration or anything like that. So what he's saying is this is what the text says. No, it doesn't. In fact, we know this from the Dead Sea Scrolls. These don't exist. It's based upon their understanding and their interpretation that the Masoretic scribes decided to put the vowel points there for Adoni for whatever reason, which we do know that they wanted to identify this as Lord Master to the human sense. And it wasn't because they believed it was about the Messiah. We're going to get into this because they're going to make a lot of errors on this.
The Septuagint, and you were saying, oh, well, in the Septuagint, it says my Lord, which is what Adoni it translates to as my Lord, Kyrios mu. And then he wouldn't accept that either.
I wouldn't accept that. No, I corrected Mike on this. It's not that I accepted it. First of all, the Septuagint uses our oldest manuscript of the Septuagint shows the sacred name abbreviation, again, for a divine title, for the Tetragrammaton, and for that. Even for Kyrios Mu. Kyrios Mu is also used for Adonai, not just for Adoni. In fact, the rest of the book of Psalms, you'll find Adonai translated a few times as Kyrios Mu. So I was correcting Mike saying even in the Greek, we have Adonai for Kyrios Mu. It's not just Adoni translated that way. And I point that out in my other PowerPoints. I've shown that before. So again, either Sean doesn't know what he's talking about here, or he's not sure, but he's not understand that the Septuagint shows in the Book of Psalms Adonai as Kyrios Mu, as well as the sacred name for that title used in Psalm 110:1. And I accepted it. I had to correct Mike. It's not accepting anything. I just don't accept that he's not accepting the fact that one, there's a sacred name abbreviation there in our oldest manuscripts, and two, Adonai is used with Kyrios Mu in other places in the Book of Psalms. So again, that's what's not being accepted here. I'm just correcting the record. So let that be known.
Yeah.
And he's just like, no, I have a Hebrew, and he kept doing this. Like, I have a Hebrew manuscript. It's like, what do you mean you have a Hebrew manuscript? There are no Hebrew manuscripts of 1 Corinthians 12. What are you talking about?
Yes, Sean, there are. I know what I'm talking about. I have them. In fact, I posted them on some of my videos and actually my social media page where I showed 12, chapter 12, verse 3 of First Corinthians in the manuscripts. We do have them. Again, this is what you get. These I'm gonna say this in a way it's just ignorant comments that we don't have. Yes, we do. And if they try to say, well, these are all dated in after the in the medieval in the Middle Ages, well, so what? Again, the date does not determine the value. In fact, 94 to 90% of all of our Greek New Testament manuscripts are after the ninth century. Does that mean that they're all no good? That we only deal with only the early ones and no. The date does not determine the value. It's what's in them. And every single one of these, all six or so of these manuscripts of we have of First Corinthians in Hebrew, 12:3, all reflect Yahweh or Adonai. Every single one. Which means those Jews who were copying and translating understood what that text was saying. Plain and simple. And again, Sean here is out of his depth because he doesn't know what I have. He doesn't know what I know in regards to this. I've been doing this for a very long time. And I've been finding these manuscripts from all around the world from the National Library of Israel, cataloged and scanned, which apparently he's not aware of. And I've written on this, I have books on this, and I posted on this many times. Again, this is ignorance of the facts.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
earliest Hebrew manuscript is the Shem Tov from the 14th century, and it just has Matthew. It doesn't have First Corinthians.
Yeah.
And like the Hebrew manuscripts that we have of like Psalm 110, for example.
Again, ignorance of what we have in the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts is not just Shem Tov. Now, we have the complete New Testament in Hebrew from multiple scribes. Sorry, Sean, you're wrong.
Either they're Masoretic texts, which means they have these vowels like that we just saw, or they don't have the Masoretic markings, in which case they don't have the vowels. So it's like it's up to the reader to decide what it is.
Yeah.
So and then I remember this too. Sorry, this is just kind of a jumble, but
No, it's not.
it's coming
Good.
back to me as I'm talking. You know, I kind of verbally process this, and then he whips out a Targum, and he's just like, "Yo, the
Yeah.
Targum says." The Targum says, you know, Yahweh or Adonai there or something like that. And it's like, okay, so look, you have the Bible itself.
I never whipped out the Targum for Psalm 110:1 because even if I did, it would say that Yahweh was speaking to His word. I don't. That's not in my debate. Again, misrepresenting. I never said that. I used the Targum as saying, identifying that Paul was familiar with the oral tradition of the Targum and how Memra was used. And I was dismissing the wisdom literature that Mike was using in Genesis, trying to incorporate wisdom literature outside of its genre and trying to universally put it in almost every book of the Hebrew Bible as if all of those references of the Memra, the word, are wisdom literature, and it's not the case. You don't do that. That's not how you do exegesis or hermeneutics. That's the only time I mentioned the Targum, and I mentioned that Paul was familiar with the oral tradition because he actually references the oral Targum in Timothy about the two sorcerers in Exodus by name, which aren't even in the Hebrew Bible, but he names them based on the Targum tradition. So again, he's going to get into this, and he doesn't. Again, I'm not sure of how much education these people have in Semitic culture and language in regards to the Bible. It's just amazing to me.
Okay. Then you have translations of the Bible, and then you have paraphrases, right? So like the Bible itself, the Hebrew, Yahweh Ladoni, right? So Yahweh to my Lord, sit at my right hand. That's what it says in the Hebrew. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you have, say, you know, like we were just looking at the New Revised Standard Version. That's a translation. Okay. Which one is the one with the authority and the inspiration of God? It's the Bible. It's not the translation.
Yeah.
No one claims the Targum is inspired. The Targum, in fact, the word Targum refers to is mentioned in the Hebrew scriptures as being something that's referred to as it literally means to interpret, to interpret. The Targum is interpreting the Hebrew. So we look at the Hebrew scriptures, say, how did the Jews understand this? We look at the Targum to understand the interpretation to help understanding. You, every one of these people, I'm sure, uses commentaries. a commentary is basically what a targum is like. It's not even it's a paraphrase, but it's also a commentary. It's recognized because that's what the targum word means, to explain. It comes from that word targumim, explain. It's found in the Hebrew Bible. I don't even know if Sean knows that, but he doesn't know really about this topic very well. I can tell he's very limited in understanding, and has not been trained in this way to understand fully the usage that even Paul uses the targum. He uses it, the oral tradition of it, of understanding, which I don't even know if Sean even realizes that. So did Paul not feel it was authoritative enough when he actually references it to Timothy? Ask that question to Sean, because Paul thought it had some authority because he actually references as authoritative of who those two men were in Exodus who went up against Moses. Go figure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's Aramaic is a translation of the Hebrew. I don't care if it's the 5th century Peshitta or it's a 2nd century BC Targum. Like I did a little looking into this, Mike, too, just out of curiosity. The earliest Targumim we have, like actual like manuscripts, is from the 6th century. They believe they were probably written in the 1st century or 2nd century, but like the earliest one, like actual piece of paper that we have is from the 6th century. But even if it was from the 2nd century, like the Psalms are hundreds of years before that, and we don't ascribe inspiration, we don't ascribe authority to a translation, much less a targum. A targum is a paraphrase of what the Jews, how they explained it,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
look, this is very obscure. Like,
But they grant the authority to the foul pointings that that's the authoritative scripture when they didn't exist at the time of Jesus or before. So I don't know anybody who really abides by that. That's saying those vowel pointings are commentary as well. Those are exactly what they are. They're commentary, um, and that's all they are. So no one ascribes them, and no one should say that's part of the um, authoritative scripture word. No, because sometimes they get it wrong. So in this case, it is wrong, unfortunately.
no Christians even know about targums typically, right? It's just such a weird thing to bring up in a debate,
Yeah.
because like the debate should be about the original text, either in an English translation or in its original language. You should not be
Mm.
bringing in these other like um, stuff from hundreds of years later.
If Sean has academic training, how could he make such a really ridiculous statement like that? How can I not bring up the languages where other scribes understood, explaining how they understood these verses from the Greek, Aramaic, the Hebrew, even Latin if you want to, or Coptic, I mean, all these different. That's what scholars do. Scholars look at Ugaritic texts. They look at the text of of different languages and cultures of even the name of God, Elohim, El, how it's used in the Ugaritic and in different forms. And like, I mean, it's amazing how this person, Sean, no offense to him personally, it's not a personal attack, but from an educated standpoint, how he could ignore how scholars actually study languages to see how words evolve, the etymology, what different cultures use them. Um, I mean, Ugaritic. I mean, it's amazing. We use everything. We use the Greek, we use the Hebrew, we use the Syriac Aramaic, we use Latin, we use the churches always use these languages. You can look at the Coptic, and I mean, there's just different ones. I mean, all scholars do this to see what the text is saying. It's amazing, but this is what happens.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. It
You,
just seems so weird to me.
it was great music to my ears. Absolutely, getting to process myself more after. A lot of that became more clear, and sort of makes you more frustrated in the moment. But because like here's what happened. What that does is now we're debating whether the Leningrad Codex is accurate or not. It's
Yeah.
like where in reality we should just be assuming.
We're debating on whether the vowel pointings are accurate, not the Leningrad Codex. Sean just admitted you can look at the word without the vowel pointings, and you can say if it's Adonai or Adoni. He just admitted that. That would, based upon the reader, would determine what it means. So no one's No one's denying the linear codex. We're looking at the vowel points to see if they're accurately resemble the context, which in verse 5 of Psalm 110:1 reflects back to Adonai. But again, these are just foolish comments that are made regarding the text. Not these are not they're not personal. I'm not talking personally, but the concept and ideas behind what they're saying.
Well, hey, that's like the main Hebrew text that
Yeah.
most scholars accept, right? So
Yeah.
now we're debating that. And he also made some comments about the Adonai versus Adonai that I really wish maybe I had pointed more out. I sort of did when I said he's like on the borderline conspiracy stuff. Uh,
Yeah.
but his whole reason for why he thinks it was changed by the Jews is because, oh, well, they would have figured that Lord would have been like Abraham or Hezekiah. And I'm like, but it's very clear that the Messiah would be a human being from the line of David. So, like, what do you mean? Right? That's not a motive to want to change it, right?
Yeah.
Uh
Yeah.
if
So let me repeat this again because apparently they don't understand. It's not just one thing that I said. I said you have Jerome who talks about this, issue data Merv talks about the changes and the understanding. The Jews rejected Jesus as the Messiah, these scribes, and they attributed from going to Rabbi Akiva down, thought it would be either Abraham or David that David was speaking about, not Jesus or the Messiah. So these are what the Christians were using this text to prove that Jesus is the Messiah and that he existed this way. And I quote this in my early church fathers in my master's thesis on how they understood Psalm 110:1, which apparently none of these men understand, that the motive was to get away from Jesus as the Messiah. They said this text was referring to one of those earthly kings or people. Therefore, Adoni fits, because if it's not Adoni, then it can't be Abraham. If that's true, then Abraham or David, then you have to reject their vow pointing because that's why they put it there. And if Jesus was right when he said David in the Spirit called him Kurion, and the Greek and the Hebrew and the and the Aramaic Peshitta affirmed the Tetragrammaton, then that's what he meant. Because Kurion is used all throughout the Book of Psalms for the divine name, the Tetragrammaton, and Adonai in translation for either one. So again, it's not just one thing; it's a number of issues.
if it had said the tetragrammaton there, right, or referred to that, I think we have good reasons to think that that's just what it would say still, right? I mean, there are like other passages sort of like that, like the,
No, we would not. Even though Issue Data Merv did believe that he said during that, and he said this in the ninth century when they were putting together the Masoretic text. He said it originally was the Tetragrammaton and changed to Adonai. That's what he says. Now, if it was Adonai, it still says Adonai because without the vowel pointings, it still says Ladonai. You can still read it that way. It's an option to the reader. So it does still reflect what it still says. It's just now the Masoretic scribes put the pointings to change it to it cannot be Adonai, but Adoni. And they did that for the reason of rejecting Jesus and the Messiah in that passage.
Yahweh sent down fire from Yahweh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like there's all sorts of things that I think probably would have quote been changed to, and so then we're debating that, and that's sort of off just where it can be fruitful, right? There's this thing we all agree on. Leningrad Codex is good,
Yeah.
and we
Well,
can
I
just
mean,
move forward.
this is really the main problem that I that I perceive with this. I guess there were a few problems, but like this one really was a main problem. Okay, so he has a different understanding of what counts as the Bible than all other Christians. Okay,
Yeah,
not just
yeah.
than you.
Again, a mischaracterization, a complete straw man. Again, see how he blankets it against all other Christians. And Sean just admitted you can't do that. You shouldn't generalize, but there he goes, generalizing. Um, I wrote my master thesis on Psalm 110:1, peer review, defended, perfect score, had no issues with it with the scholars who reviewed it, giving the same arguments. No markings down at all. It was accepted, approved, great. So again, this is just a character assassination, trying to say that oh, it's a fringe thing. It's no other it's a character assassination. All these things that they do commit while doing this, rather than dealing with the substance of what I said. The substance of what I said is a valid point. You don't have to accept it, but it is a valid point. These are valid arguments that I'm presenting, but they just want to go about it and say that they can't be, because if they are valid, then it's a possibility it can be true, but they can't have that. So therefore, we got to attack as a character, what he's saying, misrepresent him, strawman him, say things he didn't say or believes about the Aramaic. I mean, this is what they do, and then it's unfortunate. And I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but that's just how they are. That's just how they view it. And I'm going on 2 hours here, and I apologize, but I got to get through this.
And he also has a different understanding of what God's name is than all other Christians. So, like, these again are things that need to be specified when you're like in the early stages of working on a debate question to agree on. But instead, we're talking about the Masoretic pointings on the vowels, and whether or not a name is a name.
Yeah.
And that's just so frustrating, as a listener, because we're not doing this. We're not seeing two things connect. We're seeing more like this, where he's talking about one thing and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. Like, here's my argument. Engage with my argument.
Yeah. And
So yeah,
there was
that was
like a
a
dozen things
downside.
like that.
Yeah, like universalizing those and saying, oh, this is how God's economy of salvation works. It can't be a human being. Talking about salvation at all. Can't punish. According to the Torah, you couldn't punish somebody else for that person's crime. So like you rob a store, they can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
just over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one of his points that I thought was kind of interesting is that man cannot redeem or atone for another man.
Mm-hmm.
And he listed some verses from the Old Testament. And I think those verses in the Old Testament are talking about the law. And like it, according to the Torah, you couldn't punish somebody else for that person's crime. So like you rob a store.
This was amazing. He obviously did not even look at the verses. This is not Torah verses. I mean, I quoted Moses once from Exodus about blotting out. The other ones came from Ezekiel, Micah, also in Psalms. I quoted. I didn't. These are not law quotes. This is why I don't understand. Again, this is a misrepresentation. He doesn't even know what I said correctly, because it will refute their whole premise. If the scripture is clear, and he's going to say that they weren't about redemption. In fact, he's going to say right now, which I'll continue, that this is not talking about salvation or redemption. In fact, in Micah it is. I quoted the verses that deal with redemption and atoning. That's what I dealt with, not from the Torah itself, not from the first 5 books of the law. This person didn't even bother to check the references out, because they will refute their whole human understanding of sacrifice and atonement. Watch.
They can't punish your uncle,
Yeah.
right? So that, like, I don't think that's talking about salvation at all. It's just
Yeah.
talking about like criminal law, basically, which parts of the Torah do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like universalizing those and saying, oh, this is how God's economy of salvation works. It can't be a
It can't be human. Let's read it real quick. Let's look at Micah here. And I did quote this, and I got to find it real quick, clear. But it deals with verse 6. How shall I come before Yahweh and bow myself before the exalted God? Question mark. Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will Yahweh be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, for my sins? For Should I give my firstborn for my sins, a human? The fruit of my body, or the fruit of my body for the sins of my soul, the fruit of my body, his own self. He was shown to you, O man, what is good, and what does Yahweh require of you? To do justice, to love, and to walk humbly with your God. So again, Micah speaking, should I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sins of my soul? This is redemption. This is atonement language. Okay, this is not from the Torah. Again, these men never looked up anything I said. Again, even in the book of Psalms, um, 49, and Psalm 49, It says, I will incline my heart to a proverb that will solve a riddle on the harp. Verse 6, why should I fear the days of evil when iniquity at my heels surround me? Question mark, those who trust in their wealth. Verse 7, and boast in the multitude of the riches. None of them can by any means redeem, none of them persons can be, by any means redeem his brother nor give God a ransom for him. For the redemption of their life is costly. No payment is ever enough. So even redemption of oneself for another cannot be done. Nobody can ransom or redeem another. Only I don't know, and I gave other verses too that are not even in the Torah talking about that in Ezekiel. I mean, this is frustrating because he wants to interpret as the law. He's wrong. I'm talking about the whole of Scripture from the Torah to Ezekiel to Micah to Psalms and on that no person can redeem another or redemption for the sins or transgressions. None of that. No human sacrifice can do. This is why the Jews reject Jesus as the Messiah and look at him as a man because they say no one person or man can atone for another man's sins. Even the Jews understand that today. Any rabbinic Jew today will tell you Jesus is a man and will reject him because you cannot offer sin for sacrifice of another man for another man or redemption or salvation. None of that. They reject him for that purpose. But if he's God who took the form of a man, he can redeem because he's still God in that spirit nature, taking the form of a servant, found as a man, humbling himself. And for that reason, it says in Philippians, for that reason, he was given the name above every name, that he was exalted back to where he was in the beginning. Form of God, took the form of a servant, became a man, humbled himself to death, obedient to the Father, and then was exalted at the resurrection. These men, Sean did not even look at the verses I put. I did not universally do anything. If you look at the context of those verses I posted, just a few. I have many more of those. Those are just a few because, again, time. But these men misrepresent what I said, even didn't even have it correctly. But I guess that's what's expected, I guess, for this part when they don't really do the homework on that end.
Human being, but like, isn't Jesus supposed to be a human being for him too?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. So that was something that I also thought I wish I had just verbally said. I tried to when I brought up those three verses and I questioned him on it, right? So I say, hey, you're saying that God can't save by a man, but yet that seems to be exactly what these passages are saying. But as you just beautifully pointed,
I said strongly that no man, according to God's own word in the Hebrew scriptures, can atone for another man's sins. No human being can atone or sacrifice himself for another one. It's clear scripture. You don't need anything more than that to say that I said, God said, the word said, the scriptures make it clear. So the fact is, it contradicts your position because if you believe he's a man, then that contradicts what God said. Period. There's no like selective like well God said it, but then he decided to do it anyway, contrary to what he said. That's what atheists and agnostics criticize Christianity and the Bible because they say it's full of contradictions, just like this. It's a shame.
pointed out, he actually was referring to a text that's not even talking about salvation in that sense, right? He's talking about punishments for the law. So
I'll read it again in Micah. Will Yahweh be pleased? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sins of my soul? No, it's not accepted. Go to Psalms. Go to your. I listen again. These I can't. I already went through this. They're completely wrong. They don't know what they're talking about on this part. I'm sorry. It's frustrating when they can't represent scriptures accurately.
two different things, two
Yeah.
two different things. So yeah, I wish I had maybe focused on that a bit more, but I think the scriptures I presented there again, they're so clear, right?
Yeah.
How can you misunderstand that? And if it's true that Jesus did need to be fully divine, then why don't we like see that, right? Why doesn't it say since by, a man came death and we can't be saved by a man, God sent, fully divine Jesus or none of that stuff is stated, right? They just read all of that into the text. Oh, he also kept saying,
I read that into the text. Okay. have this mind in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua, who existing in the form of God, existing present participle, existing in the form, did not consider equality with God to thing to be held on to or grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. The same word, form of God, form of servant, same one, form of God, form of a servant. So he was a fully servant and fully the form of God, being made in the likeness of men and being found in human form, he humbled himself, becoming obedient to death, even to death of the cross. There it is. Paul. This is where they take this and they twist it apart. He was existing in the form of God, took the form of a servant, found in the fashion of man, humbled himself, even being obedient to the Father, and humbled himself even to death. Can't get any clearer than that. You really can't. It's right there, black and white. Read it for yourself. Don't twist it. It's simple reading. You want to talk about the simple, plain reading of the text? There it is. There it is. Who existing in the form of God took the form of a servant, found in the fashion of human form and likeness of men, or he made in likeness of men, humble, found in the human form, humbled himself, obedient unto death, obedient to who as a servant to the Father, and then was exalted. That's it. Simple.
Well, we affirm the full humanity of Jesus. Like, yeah, congratulations. You also affirm full divinity, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And you tried to bait him a little bit on hypostatic union, and he just would not go there at all. Like
yeah.
he's just like, I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole. Yeah,
because that wasn't the debate. I have articles on the hypostatic union, usia, from both sides of the fence of scholarship. Well, scholars from Oxford and other places. That wasn't the topic of the debate. Why would I get into an issue that we're not debating? I can, if you want to debate that, take up all the time you need. Take another 3 or 4 hours to go through that. That's why I'm saying these people either don't know how debates work or they're not familiar enough with the concept of how debates are supposed to go. But
as soon as you get into that, you definitely have the advantage as a biblical Unitarian, because it doesn't really make sense once you like start talking about, okay, so he's God and man at the same time. So he knows everything and he doesn't know everything. He can die and he can't die.
Mm-hmm.
He has no beginning and he has a beginning, just on and on. Like,
these are the comments that really Unitarians like to use. Can't die, can God can't die, man. Again, Philippians 2, verse 5 through 8 and 9, clear as day. He was if he is he existed in the form of God prior to being in the form of a servant, taking a man, obedient to death, humbling himself, being exalted. I mean, he can't. The human side of the Messiah is what died. The spirit of the Messiah is deity divine. These men don't know the distinction between a spirit and a human form, human flesh. Uh, our bodies, what Paul talks about, our tent, our vessel, that our spirit is animating and keeping alive. Once our spirit leaves the body dies. The flesh dies. The spirit keeps the body alive, keeping everything working. That's the breath of God, however you want to put it. The spirit, our spirit, when it leaves the body dies. So again, the Jesus existing in the form of God is again, Philippians 2 dismantles every Unitarian argument. When you actually diagram it, look at the syntax and the grammar, it really destroys every Unitarian argument about Jesus being God and man. That he can't be. It destroys their position. And the sacrifice that I mentioned, the atonement that they have nothing about. They know nothing about trying to attribute to the law only. It's all throughout the Hebrew Bible, which I just pointed out, that no man can atone for another man's sins. Amazing.
it
Yeah.
just is, it's just square circles. So I thought it was admirable that you were trying to pull him into that, because he really does have that as part of his system, even though he wasn't willing to go there.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about his? I think I counted 11 pre-existent. He had a slide with 11 pre-existence verses on it, totally unrelated to the topic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, what did you think about that? Like,
So
So that's unrelated to the topic, but bringing in the Trinity and these other things you want to argue, Osea and Church Fathers, those aren't unrelated to the topic. Pre-existing as Yahweh is is part of the is could be part of the topic if we're discussing how if Jesus is Yahweh. Mike wants to say, how is that possible? Because that's what he's going to say. Well, because he existed as Yahweh before the incarnation. That's why part of Mike's questions I had to do that because Jesus says, I have come down from heaven. I did these things because he was Yahweh before he took the form of man. He had to empty himself, taking on another nature, identity of flesh, taking the form of a servant, existing as God. That's incarnation. That is pre existing. So that was plotted in there because Mike asked those questions about it. I knew he would, so I had to have verses about that. But all of a sudden, now that's not relevant to the topic, but the Trinity and all the other stuff is regarding to Jesus as Yahweh. Wow, that was interesting.
Oh,
Here's a bunch of pre-existence verses.
Yeah, man, there are so many things that could have been called out and pointed out. That was I realized that towards the end that you could just grant him all of those, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he pre-exists. That doesn't automatically mean he's Yahweh, right?
No.
Yeah.
Actually, it does if he is called Yahweh. If he is Yahweh by name, title, nature, then yes, he is. He pre existed as Yahweh, the Word. Therefore, it does. We're not talking about a Micah. They bring in Joel Witness and all that. Grant me pre existence, then he's not human. He's not. If you grant that, then your whole he has to be human is thrown out the window. So if you want to grant that, no matter how you look at it, from Mormon, Jehovah's Witnesses, Trinitarian, then Unitarian is false, and it's false because they want to say only human, no pre-existence. Then their whole theology collapses if they want to grant that, and I don't think they do.
Definitely not. Yeah, there are these people called Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know if you ever heard of them. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know this guy at all. Would you debate him again? What do you think?
At this point, I don't know, but I'm definitely going to accept. I think some of the good critique that you have mentioned. You know, also Dale warned me right from the beginning that he was going to bring in a lot of this weird stuff.
Yeah.
I probably should have. We need to have a conversation. I need to know what your view actually is on Yahweh, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, because we if we want to come in and actually get somewhere about whether Jesus is Yahweh, we can't also then be turning this into a debate about, you know, the vowel points and the Leningrad Codex and then, you know, these words in the Peshitta, even though it's
What he's saying is, don't bring in scholarship, don't bring in academic knowledge, don't talk about linguistics, don't do any of that. So if you want to have a debate, bring yourself down to the level of just a high school graduate level, layman terms, read the English Bible, appeal to concordances and lexicons when needed, but don't bring in scholarship, don't bring in your linguistic training, don't bring in your exegesis training or hermeneutics training, your master's thesis or your I'm doing another PhD. Don't do it. Don't bring any of that to the table. Don't. That's what he's saying. Do not do any of that. Just come in like me, simple minded. This is it. English only. Maybe some lexicons and concordances as needed, root fallacies and all. No, that's not how it works, and I'm sorry, but yeah, we have to define our terms. I agree with Mike. We got to define our terms because I don't even know if I would debate him again in the future because it's not he's not the level to debate the linguistic aspects, textual aspects. He's not in that field. He'll just appeal to Unitarian scholarship to some point, or obscure it, or misrepresent it, like he's did, and even me. He even tried to bring in when I was bringing the Peshitta, mentioned the Sirach Mardia. He tried to tell me, oh look, and I think I'll be honest, I'm almost 100% sure, and I'm going to put a big assumption here that he was Googling or AIing his answers on some of the things about the Peshitta because I could see him looking and kind of looking stuff up. And then he brought up John chapter 7, verse 4, trying to say that that's Maria, when it's actually in the Peshitta, it's Marie. It's like my Lord, Sir, in human form, not Maria Tetragrammaton. But I can see he's doing it. He was actually trying to keep up with either AI or Google. That's it. You can't do that. You can't because you're going to misrepresent it like this gentleman did with Sean, using AI to point something out that he's wrong about, even with Grok with the tenses of the verbs in Hebrew. So can't do that.
just this far late text that, you know,
Yeah.
represents 1%.
It's a translation, man. It
Yeah.
is
So
a translation. Here's something to just throw in there. Uh, so like the first text he really harped on was 1 Corinthians 12, verse 3, right? There's no way Paul would write to a city called Corinth in Aramaic. Nobody in Corinth can read Aramaic.
Straw man never said that. Never appealed to that. In fact, Corinth, he goes to Corinth to the synagogue at Corinth, speaking to Hebrew Jews, Hebrew-speaking Jews. So they would have understood Paul from the Hebrew Jew. Look at the book of Acts. Paul went from synagogue to synagogue to synagogue, speaking to Jews. Sometimes there was Hellenistic Jews, Greek Jews there, but he went from synagogue from all the different cities, writing back to those synagogues in Ephesus, Corinth. These were Jews. Read Acts. Look at where Corinth was. Look at where he went in Acts and who he spoke. Who did he speak to in Corinth? That's all you got to do. You don't have to assume anything.
What do they read? They read Greek.
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah,
whether Paul spoke Aramaic or not is a secondary issue. Like you're not going to write to a city in Greece and write it in Aramaic, a language that's like basically like Gaelic today. Like nobody really speaks it. There's like a few people in Ireland that know it, right? But like you're not going to write to, Rome, Washington D.C. and write it in Gaelic. You're going to write it in English because that's what the people there speak. That's their So
yeah,
you know
yeah.
it doesn't make any sense, this whole thing. uh,
Well, and you. Sorry, I didn't mean to
I want
interrupt.
I want to ask you this: what if he agreed to give you his opening statement ahead of time?
I'd probably agree. It would make
Because then
it
at least you
more
would
open.
know what is his plan,
Yeah, right.
right?
Well, it's just like when he's for example, he's bringing up the difference between Maria and Mar, and like that whole thing is assuming that that text is authoritative to begin with, right? So
Yeah.
now it's like we're not really even debating about whether Jesus is Yahweh. We're debating.
No one's assuming authoritative text. We're comparing translations to see how scribes understood words when they translate them into their language and how they use them. Every scholar knows this. Every scholar does this when they examine text and they want to compare it to see how other languages translate into other languages and the way they viewed them. This is basic stuff here. Sorry.
About whether the text is accurate, whether it's valid, and he would just disregard all of the text I would present, which predate his, which are what is most accepted. Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to debate that because everybody already agrees those are the standard that we use. Right? So
Yeah.
that it was completely unfair. So yeah, I'd probably agree under the right conditions, and I think in regardless any debate going forward, I want to use more wisdom prior to actually doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think it was good that you did it, and you know, for my money, I wouldn't mind seeing you debate him again, uh, under any conditions. I think it makes us look good, because we have just common sense and we have the Bible, and he's got this weird Aramaic stuff, and a certain way of approaching things that nobody's ever heard of before.
It's funny how they just character assassinate people without even knowing anything about them. I never no Aramaic. Nobody else. I got books behind me from major scholars who I repeat through the debate who do agree with what I say. They might never really got that deep into the scholarship because I don't buy $15 books for scholarship. I buy Braille publications, articles, journals, hundreds of dollars worth of materials and books from academia. Even from my university, I have to go in there. I have to, if they don't have it there, I have to go find it and go to Braille. If they don't have it in the library online from my university, I have to go to Braille and find it there and pay. I mean, this is unbelievable that they character assassinate me. I'm not saying they do it intentionally, but they are doing it indirectly, maybe subconsciously, and that's just what they do. I mean, I never said anything about Aramaic supremacy. I use the languages plural because that's linguistic training, exegesis, hermeneutics. Sean obviously has a different take on what he's saying about me. Weird stuff that nobody. I mean, this is unbelievable. Um, Generalization all over the place, and they do it, and that's how they it seems have to win a debate or argument by doing this, so they can make themselves look a little better. Um, and again, nothing personal towards any. I don't know Sean, Mike. I know semi from his stuff. This is not. I'm not trying to. I'm not attacking them personally. I'm attacking what they're saying against me. The arguments against me is what I'm attacking, and that's what I'm doing. So, but let's finish. They're almost done.
Hmm.
Obscure reasoning,
Yep.
um, based on grammatical nuances. They're not commonly accepted. So I think it just makes us look good because like we're just like, well, this is what my Bible says, and he's like, oh yes, but the Pashita, you
Yeah.
know.
You're right.
So I think it did some good for the cause. I think if in any debate, if you can swap, there are some times where it's really advantageous to swap opening statements just to like make that rebuttal strong on both sides.
Hmm.
Because like in the moment, it's really hard to think.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know how you held it together for 4 hours. That was insane.
It was definitely tough, but I did my best. And Sean, I really appreciate you bringing me on to talk about it, help process through some of that. It certainly
Yeah,
means a lot. And yeah, I want to do my best. I think Unitarianism is true. It continues to offer better answers, but I always want to do the best at
yeah.
portraying them, what those are. Right.
Well, thanks, Mike, so much for joining me today to have this conversation. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate it, Sean. Thank you.
Welcome, Mike.
All right. So again, I thought the debate went. To me, I thought the debate went well between me and Mike. We were very respectful, very cordial. Did not get into it, insulting each other. Like you said, when I do comments, I usually respond the way people respond to me in comments. But if we debate, I debate with respect. Mike, I have great respect for Mike and what he does. Obviously, I don't agree with him, but there is a sense of sometimes between him and other Unitarians to put down Trinitarians and character assassinate or say things like kind of some things I said here today. Um, whether or not a debate in the future is there, I don't know. I mean, Mike would if we under certain conditions. I don't know if I would even under the right conditions. Just depends because he doesn't have the knowledge, the training, or the experience to deal with a lot of the stuff. And if I bring in something he's not aware of, it's going to be, oh, that's the fringe. Nobody believes that, and it's because he doesn't have a clue, and he'll be googling and trying to AI it like Sean does when I give him something and he relies on AI. You're gonna read down below on this link I provide where I did what he did. Sean did. I went to Grok and put it on there and contradicts exactly what he said, um, but it gives it better explanation than ChatGPT. Um, so again, this is. I mean, I enjoyed the debate. It was great. Respect to Mike and nothing personal toward him. I think he's got a lot ahead of him. He's got a lot of stuff to do. Sean, I don't even know Sean at all. I don't know what his education is, his training. But some of the things he said on there with AI doing this and that is a little bit concerning on how he's verifying stuff or fact checking. Anybody can do that. I can do that. I just did that with Grok and contradicted what he said. So about the name of God. So again, I want to thank first just thanks Mike for taking the break. Appreciate it. We got through it. We didn't insult each other and do things toxically like he said on either end. But I think Sean needs to understand that he needs to go back and watch the debate again and pay close attention to what I said because he misrepresented me, straw man me, a lot of stuff. So but I want to say thank you everyone here. If you like, comment, share. This is my YouTube channel, Bible Answers Unfiltered. I try to get to everybody here, so please like and share this channel. We want it to grow over 60,000 plus. But again, I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. And this is Bible Answers Unfiltered. And God bless.